Again, we've returned. We called the meeting to order at 6 o'clock and had a closed session and talked about Montgomery College development and potential litigation on another matter, and then we had an administrative function session. So we're now back to our regular agenda with council comments. Any of my colleagues have any comments? Councilmember Clay and then Councilmember Wright.
I'm going to be out for two Mondays or one, from the 3rd through the 16th. So if I have constituents who need assistance, it would be terrific if you could contact the mayor or contact the city manager while I'm away.
And that's of May or June?
It's May 3rd through May 16th. I'm going to Arkansas to help with the flood recovery and do some long-term community development activities. So I'll miss you all, but if you need assistance, please contact the mayor or the city manager. And also, this Wednesday night is the Long Branch, Sligo traffic calming after the traffic test debrief. So I hope people will show up for that. And then I thought we were going to get something tonight on the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Council. Do they have a report coming out to us soon? Yes?
They've been working on one. I don't know if it's been finalized yet.
I think we're going to hear more about that during public comment.
I see a member of the committee in the audience, so.
Okay, great. And then I was hoping to get an update on where we're at with the hospital land use committee at some point in the future, not necessarily right now.
Yeah, we have advertised for applicants in the city newsletter, and I believe the city clerk has received one or two, and once there's enough of a critical mass, she'll be scheduling those for interviews at the mayor's discretion.
Okay. The link, the page and the link hasn't worked from the
Okay.
city website, and so that's thwarting people's efforts to apply.
Okay, I'll follow up with communications tomorrow.
Okay, great, thank you.
First, I want to say sorry I wasn't here last week, and thank my council colleagues for unanimously passing the ban on the city using public resources to buy bottled water. And if I were here, I would have voted for it, and I'm in support of it. The second thing I want to talk about is the Eco Park development site on the corner of Maple Avenue and Carroll Avenue. Generally, I think the community is very supportive of that development going forward. Unfortunately, at this point, it appears that the developer isn't totally stalled, but due to some of the financial aspects in the lending market right now, is having a little bit of difficulty getting funding. They're still potentially pursuing going forward themselves or selling the project. But in the short term, the site is quite an eyesore. So I know the city manager has contacted the appropriate departments in D.C. to ask them to get the developer to clean up the site. I spoke with the developer this morning and made that request. We've also contacted Miro Bowser's office, and Valerie Irvin's aware of it as well. So I think by a concerted effort to push and get the site cleaned up, it'll be very helpful to our community in terms of having something that looks more attractive in the short term, and then hopefully in the medium or longer term, the development will still occur.
Councilmember Snipper.
I just wanted to say I was quite honored to be a part of the Azalea Awards on Saturday night. I'm sorry we couldn't stay for the whole thing. It was a really delightful affair. And I was very impressed at the volunteer firefighters annual banquet we went to at the dedication of folks who have devoted, in this case, 50 years to working in our fire department. And so both the Azalea Awards and the firefighters banquet reminded me of the large number of people in Tacoma Park who devote substantial amounts of time and energy, money as well, to making our city the cool place it is. And I just want to repeat my thanks to those folks.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to welcome back the slim and trim and looks like he's fit, Pat Lovelace. Welcome back. I'm glad you're in good health. Survivor of heart surgery. Good to have you back with us after several months. The other thing I just wanted to mention, as I was going through the lobby, I saw a flyer for several different recreation programs. One caught my eye. It's a family day trip to the Boyd's Bear Country in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It says it has a fee of $10 for city residents. It piques my interest, and Barb, I wonder if I could get, if the council could get some information on this, what the goal is, and what the revenue projections and expense projections are for this. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Ramos.
Yes, I want to thank everyone in Ward 3 and other wards who came to our Tacoma Junction kind of brainstorming session and reporting, the report out from committee of SS Carroll. And I see a couple members here tonight. Thank you for presenting. And I look forward to having more get-togethers in that way so that we can look ahead to what kind of a junction we want and work towards that vision and keep principles that are starting to clarify about pedestrian safety and a sense of place and a good place for business and walkability and bicycle access as well in that area. So thanks, and keep on coming.
Okay, I've got a couple things that I wanted to just go through. The first one is that I just wanted to let everybody know that after last week's meeting, I decided that my slightly more lax style on holding people to 3 minutes in their comments and kind of having a little bit of a chance for a little bit more dialogue in a meeting wasn't working very well. So the hammer is coming down. I'm going to hold to the 3 minutes. I'm going to use the timer on everyone, and I would ask that people, when making public comments at the beginning or comments on various items, please try and hold to that 3 minutes. I'm going to be a lot stricter than I have been. A couple other things I wanted to mention. One is that I talked to a city resident yesterday at the farmer's market who informed me that their house in Tacoma Park had been hit by a tornado last week. I knew that the tornado had been in Chillum. I did not realize that it hit Tacoma Park. So an area over there off of Erskine Avenue, what would it be, 13th Avenue, 14th? So for those folks who don't think that tornadoes only happen in Kansas or La Plata, we had one in Tacoma Park, and it caused significant damage. So I was honored last week to host Mayor Raul Perez from Ipala, Guatemala. We had a very interesting discussion, in spite of the fact that he spoke almost no English and I spoke almost no Spanish. But we had interpreters with us, and it was very interesting to learn that one of the reasons that he was here for a couple of days was that his city in Guatemala, like ours, has about 19,000 people. We're about 2.5 square miles. His is about 220 square miles. They have 4 local police officers, but only 1 police car. So we commented the next time the police are worried about the number of cars that they have, we'll point out that difference, and maybe we don't want to go there. One of the main reasons he was here, which I found very interesting, was that they have 19,000 people in their town in Guatemala. They also have 7,000 of their residents who have immigrated to this area around Langley Park, Tacoma Park. 7,000 just from one town. And an additional 8,000 people who are living around Mount Kisco, New York. So as one person finds a good situation, they put out the word, and 15,000 people from that small town have left 19,000 people there. The rest are here working. He was here to talk to his former residents and talk to them about what they're doing here and how it connects with people at home and various issues. I know they were to have a public meeting on Saturday night at La Union Mall, and they were expecting about 600 of their residents at that meeting. So it was a very interesting discussion. And he brought gifts for the city, and I will be happy to share those with my colleagues. We will need to do so outside of this building.
Yeah.
It had alcoholic content. It was rum, local rum from Guatemala. I also had the pleasure to attend the Gear Up for Safety Fair on Saturday that was out back of this building. It was sponsored by the Montgomery County Safe Kids Coalition, the Tacoma Park Safe Routes to School, and Amera Group. And one of the nice parts of it was that the police department had a number of bicycles to give away and new bike helmets to go with them. And we had various raffles and provided, when I was there, all the kids who showed up with bicycles and helmets. And how many?
About 40.
About 40 bicycles. And a lot of these kids were very young. They had never had a bicycle and didn't know how to ride one, so the police were there providing instant training on how to ride a bicycle, and to see the look on the kids' faces when they got it about how to ride a bicycle and could go home with a bicycle and a helmet. And I remember when I rode a bicycle as a kid, that was freedom. That was the way to get around when you're a young kid. So this was a great opportunity for local residents. I did want to note that we got a fair amount of coverage last week from our bottled water resolution. I was interviewed by a number of media outlets, and I thought the coverage was pretty good. In particular, there was a very good spot on local channel 4, and I believe there's a link to that video that people might want to see. It kind of gets at the issues pretty well and begins our education effort. I wanted to remind folks that the Montgomery County Planning Board last week unanimously recommended a special exception for the new Washington Adventist Hospital site up in Silver Spring, and so the next step in that process is for them to apply for their certificate of need, and it's most likely that they will file for that in August. And also point out that the county is not funding the study of financial stability of county hospitals that was advocated by Councilmember Leventhal, so that we might want to talk to our county representatives about what's going to happen in this process and what information that we have to go on, what they have to go on to understand healthcare in the county. I think that's very necessary. And finally, just to follow up on what Councilmember Robinson was talking about with the Tacoma Junction and possibility of changes there, just to let people know that staff did send a follow-up letter to the State Highway Administration requesting the next step in their process, which is for their public input process in reaction to that study that they provided, which seemed to me didn't provide much of an option, given that they left the second roundabout that they say would be required off the map, off the study, which kind of negates any viability of what they proposed. So I think it's very important for folks to realize that this is our opportunity to engage State Highway in talking about some potential solutions for the junction, and thinking about how that will play out over the next 2 years with the construction of the fire station, which is now underway. So I had a long list, but that's it.
Bruce, do we know what their public engagement or public comment process consists of yet?
I'm going to meet with the city manager and the head of Department of Housing and Community Development on that matter tomorrow morning, so I hope I'll be able to report more, but unless you want to fill us in more now, Farm.
No, we'll be meeting with Councilmember Robinson tomorrow, but there's actually a meeting with SHA representatives scheduled about 2 weeks from now, I believe, to get a little bit more an idea of what that public process would entail.
All right. The next item is for the record, and I just wanted to note that I had 2 proclamations for members of the volunteer fire department who served for 50 years, as Councilmember Snipper mentioned before. One recognizing John Parsley and the other one recognizing Robert Jarbo. The involvement of those 2 individuals in this community since 1958 has been phenomenal, and I do have the formal proclamations, and I invited them to come to a council meeting, or I will present them to them at a volunteer fire department, either membership meeting or board meeting, particularly since Mr. Parsley was unable to attend the banquet since a member of his family died the day before the banquet. So we may have a visit by the 2 of them to a future council meeting to get their proclamations. Next item on the agenda is adoption of the minutes. We have minutes from February 25th, March 3rd, 10th, and 17th, 2008. Do I hear a motion to adopt those minutes?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Clay, seconded by Councilmember Snipper. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? They carry unanimously. Tonight's excuse me, tonight's agenda, there's one change to the agenda. The first work session item, agenda item 5, update from the Independence Day Committee, has been postponed probably until next week. Members of the committee were not able to attend tonight. And one other thing I'd just like to note about future agenda items is that I'm trying to schedule a discussion in the relatively near future about mansionization. Next item on the agenda is public comment period, and that's for comments by any member of the public, and that would be for any item not on our regular meeting agenda. So we'll take comments on those 3 agenda items when we get to them, but comments on anything that is on the work session agenda or anything that's not on the agenda at all. And as I said earlier, please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Mr. Lovelace, welcome back.
This is Mr. Pat Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park, Maryland. I just wanted to thank everybody in City Council, Terry Siemens, and all the other people for the support they gave me while I was in the hospital having open heart surgery. They had to do a quadruple bypass graft. By the way, the doctors call it a CABG, the CABG. It's an abbreviation for coronary artery bypass graft. And I wanted to tell you, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Although I'm still having some problems. You know, I'm still having problems with the other issue I have with the granuloma and everything. It's continuing to weaken me. But it feels great to be able to stand up again without passing out. And I want to also say hi to Joy Austin Lane for giving me the calls and stuff and the support she gave me as she's watching. And Jamie Raskin, who came up to visit me while I was in the rehab, recovering from the ordeal. And also, I'd like to ask a question of the City Council. Is it possible to lift the, get the state to drop the requirement that felons cannot vote? Because we have an important election coming up. And I'd like to see that coming to a quick end, because felons, once they've served their time, they're no different than I am. We've all made mistakes. I've made them too. And I can vote, so why can't they vote? And I'd like to see a change in that. And also, anybody who's having graduation coming up pretty soon, the graduate high school, I want to see you, you know, your initiation into adulthood is to get a voter registration card out and register to vote. Forget about the beer, forget about the big joint, forget about the partying. That's all poison in your brain. I want you to come out like me. If I can do it, you guys can do it. Register to vote. Take part in your city councils. Take part in your politics, your demonstrations. We are out there for you. We are out there to save your hide as well as my own. Because any one of us could get the knock on the door that a relative had died in Iraq or Iran. We do not need to have that happen. Let's stand up and take part in our demonstrations. If we're against the war, let's stand up and be part of it. I can do it, you can do it. I was down there Saturday at the demonstration right after heart surgery. If I can do it, for God's sake, there's no excuse. As an American, we have to do it. Thank you very much for letting me share. Remember, Tacoma Park rules.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike Israel, 1003 Elm Avenue. I'm a member of the Public Safety Community Advisory Committee, have been about 5 years. The committee was given a charge to write a paper, a white paper, on framing the issues for evaluating the police department. And I took it upon myself to write a draft, which was submitted to the committee. And there was a process of editing, rewriting, cutting, and a collaborative process. What emerged from that collaborative process was, I think, a consensus of the committee in the final version. The assignment was to turn it in by the end of April, and the chair of the committee, Andy Kellerman, plans to do so tomorrow to the mayor. Now, it was to go before the committee on our regular scheduled meeting in April last Wednesday, and unfortunately, I was unable to attend. I knew well in advance of that. I told the chair, I don't miss very many meetings, but I did miss that meeting. I thought it would be a routine approval. But I learned that the paper was changed, I think significantly changed. The most important sentence was taken out. Something was added to it that was called an appendix. It's really not an appendix at all. It's really another section which contradicts the previous part of the paper. It's like you're reading along and then you come to a new section and it says, disregard everything you've read before, now take into account this. Well, it was approved by the committee last Wednesday and it will be turned in. And I'm disappointed that I don't think the real collaborative version of it is the one that's going to be turned in. So I'm coming here tonight as a citizen. And I want to submit to you the paper that I wrote and was edited and is the product of collaboration, I think. And it's what I think represents the will of the committee. So all I can do is ask you to read it. As a practical matter, I think that this is the one that would have been approved had I been at the meeting last Wednesday. It was a different chemistry because I wasn't there and I wasn't able to object to the changes. I think something happened. I don't know exactly what happened, but there was a manipulation and the changes were made. So all I can ask you to do is to read the original version. It's not just that I wrote it. It was also submitted to editing and rewriting, and I think it was improved, but this is nevertheless the version that has my name on it. So if you don't mind, I'll give it to the clerk and hand it out to each member of council.
Sure, thank you. Any other comments?
Should I proceed?
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask a question. There will be a comment period after the school presentation. Is that correct?
If you have any comments on the school presentation, why don't you make them now?
Because there are a number of people here, I believe, who care to comment on the school. So I guess I can make mine. I think it would probably be the same whether I start now or afterwards. But I think what I'm going to say may be relevant to the presentation, so I'll go ahead. And I'm Richard Levine. I live at 7420 Cedar Avenue on the corner of Cedar and Philadelphia, right across the street from this new proposed development. And what is involved, it's not just a school renovation, but a major project that involves constructing a raised parking lot on our gateway road of historic character by our municipal center. And what is proposed, if not done properly, with regard to buffering the sight of the cars from the street and houses across the street, and choosing a design and materials for the retaining walls and staircase that preserve the character of the wooden setting that now exists, could create the anti-wonder of the hanging parking lot of Tacoma Park. So what I'm requesting is that as the project proceeds, extreme care be given to the landscaping and design and choice of materials chosen to construct the retaining wall and the staircase and enclose the parking lot. I believe that these aesthetic values will determine the look of our community for many decades to come. And other major issues also exist which concern myself and my neighbors. They include traffic and safety concerns, and concerns over stormwater drainage into our neighborhood, which is already part of a floodplain that's experienced severe flooding involving the backup of sewer water into our homes. And so I look forward to proceeding with you on this.
Thanks very much.
Good evening. I'm Joy Markowitz. I live at 7415 Cedar Avenue. And I'd also like to comment on the plans that are underway for the Tacoma Park Elementary School expansion. We are requesting the neighbors in the vicinity careful study of how the new building's parking lot and driveway will impact storm water and sewage flow in the vicinity. These additions to the existing site, along with the removal of much of the hillside and change in landscaping and such, are likely, we believe, to affect the water flow and the storm runoff. I think, as you are aware, the houses at the Philadelphia end of Cedar Avenue have had repeated problems over the years with sewage in our basements, and particularly during heavy storms. We know this is a stormwater drainage problem. It can't be anything else because of the timing of it. Most recently, in the summer of 2006, 5 houses had significant stormwater sewage backups. And this was by far the worst flooding that we've had collectively in years. And we believe it was due in part to not complete careful consideration of what took place here for the expansion and the rebuilding of the municipal building. So I would strongly urge careful monitoring of this, and you know, I am, of course, I'm not an expert or at all in this area, but it really deserves very careful attention as we proceed. Thank you very much.
And if I can just ask for a quick clarification.
Sure.
You're talking, the backup was sewage or stormwater?
It was definitely sewage.
Okay.
I mean, there's no question about it.
Okay.
But it was sewage that commingled with the storm. I mean, it was during that summer storm. The most recent one, and the others were similar, was during that very, very heavy extended period of rain that we had in the summer of 2006.
Okay.
And at the same time, you know, the manhole covers. I couldn't think that the manhole covers were, you know, rising up off of their place due to the water. So yes, it was.
Thanks.
Good evening. I'm Susan West Montgomery. I live at 10 Philadelphia Avenue. I'm the parent of a former Tacoma Park Elementary student and a future Tacoma Park Elementary student, and I have served as the PTA representative on the whole Tacoma Park Elementary School expansion discussion, and I've been involved since the very beginning. I want to make a couple of points. One is that this project is very important to the quality and character of the school for a number of reasons, both in terms of the built environment, but also it will consolidate the enrollment area and allow us to have 2 sister schools, 2 very consistent pools of children coming into our school, both at Tacoma Park Elementary and then feeding into Piney Branch. So it changes the enrollment arrangement of this down county school district for the good, and it was something that the parents of Tacoma Park Elementary and the other schools have been working for a long time. It will certainly create a better facility where we'll get rid of the portables and create a better integrated and more secure community, and it will also rationalize the influx of buses and pedestrians and cars onto the site. And so much of the challenges in developing it have been in terms of trying to figure out how these different ways of getting to the school commingle. So it's a very important project. I've been very impressed at how the community has been willing to sort of consider the changes that are proposed. A good school, a good school in our community is good for all of us, and we need to remember that as we're going forward planning for it. There's 3 things that I would encourage you to look at very closely when you're given the plans from the Montgomery County Public School System. They're just 3 elements that are still a little in flux in the design and that we're very concerned about. The one is the playing field in the back of the school. It already was a small site. The addition of the building and the addition of play areas, programmed play areas, that is asphalt and wood chipped areas, has severely encroached in the green space of that site. What complicates it is that it's also a very badly drained and badly, it's not a level site in the back. And so any plans that move forward have to take into consideration making all of that space in the back as usable as possible for students and even people after school. It's a very difficult site, but we need to make it as high quality green space as we possibly can because we're losing so much of the green grass in that back part of the school. The second thing that I ask you to take a real careful look at is the entrance to the site at Cedar and the community center, the library parking lot. We really believe that access to the site from that end should be at the corner, even if it requires a switchback staircase going up the hill. It is a much more attractive way for the pedestrians to enter. And can I make one more comment? It just is a much more attractive way for people to enter the site. It will be easier than going to the staircase, which is now in the plans that you will see, where they will then access the sidewalk and have to loop around the bus drive to get up to the school. And finally, the biggest key to all of this will be the transition year, the year in which the students will be off-site. And we ask you, as the City Council, to have a meeting with the Montgomery County Public School System to talk about that transition year. The PTA and the administration of Tacoma Park Elementary are working very diligently to make that year the best possible year it can be given the upheaval. And we really have some great ideas, and the county has been very supportive of a lot of those ideas, but the weight of your concerns and your involvement in that process will ensure that the county responds to the parent community's needs. There are many families that have already said they will opt out that year, and we can't do anything about that. But there are a lot of children that are going to remain at the school, and we need to make it the best possible transition year for them. And I hope you'll work with us to do that. And a meeting with the county would be a really wonderful way to air those and get your ideas and thoughts as well. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Karen Lang. I live at 41 Philadelphia Avenue, so I'm a neighbor of the school, and I am also the mother of a former student at the school and of a future student at the school. My daughter will start the year that they're having the construction, so she'll be a kindergartner that year. I am also concerned about the appearance of the parking lot, and I hope a lot of attention will be given to that. But my primary concerns tonight are two. One is pedestrian access to the school, safe pedestrian access to the school. It seems like the plans give a lot of attention to access by cars and buses, but not so much by walkers. They haven't completely figured that out yet. And a very large percentage of the students going to the school walk. I walk my son. I will be walking my daughter when I can, when they return from Grosvenor. And kids love to run ahead. That's one thing they do. You can be holding, and not only that, but often parents have several children, some of them small. So there really needs to be a safe way to get to the school. And I also want to speak in support of a stairway from the library parking lot up the hill to the last part of the bus driveway. Because where the staircase is situated now, in order to get there, parents and students will have to walk very close to the new intersection, which breaks through the fence, which has formerly protected children from vehicles on Philadelphia. Not only that, but once they get up that staircase, they are asked to follow a sidewalk that right next to buses and cars coming into the site, and they are asked to do what they will not do, to go away from the school and then back towards the school when they can see the school. And I believe they will cut across the driveway, and even if there's a wall or a fence, try to get over that. So please, if a staircase could be put in, it doesn't matter if it goes back and forth. Children are drawn to that area right now. They want to run up that hill into the trees. They will love going up that way. Please, I just really hope that the safety of children is considered. And the other thing I'm concerned about, and this very briefly, is the 40-minute trip to Grosvenor on a school bus. That's one way for children who are 5 years old in school buses with seats so high that the bus driver cannot see what the students behind him are doing. Children who've never before ridden a bus, who may have trouble not visiting the bathroom frequently. You know, there's going to be all kinds of concerns and complications, and I just hope that the city council gives its support to a great degree, a great amount of planning, so that the trips to and from the school by all the children, especially the kindergartners, go well, and so that parents are reassured, and maybe we have fewer families leaving the school. I think there needs to be some reassurance that I haven't heard yet from the school and from the school system to parents. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Any other comments?
Bob Sheldon, 319 Boyd Avenue. I'm calling because I'm asking that the city look at some of the construction work that's done to the city streets. I speak from the seat of my pants. I ride a bicycle to and from work, and I see the work that's being done on Carroll Avenue that's very poorly done by WSSC. There's very poor paving they've done. I don't know if this is their final work, but it's very uneven. There are quite a few gaps on the cracks of it, lots of debris in the road. But that's not the only instance. I mean, you look around Savory, and I don't really care about the street deterioration there. I care about the patches that have been done. And there's a giant divot that's right near Savory that's very abusive to ride in. And that's not done by the city deteriorating, that's done by the person who repaired the street or did whatever work that had to be done at that point. Is there somebody from the city who goes and monitors this work? Somebody cuts up my backyard, I hope that, I'm going to go check and see what they do. I hope that somebody from the city is doing that also. I mean, just little things such as whatever utility work was done at Carroll right at the fire department, where they cut in the street to lay a line. That wasn't repaired properly. There's a little small divot that's there. Does anybody look at that? There's a section on Boyd Avenue where somebody cut in the street right at the corner of Carroll and Boyd, and they didn't repair it properly. They didn't cover it up. Right now, the undercoating, the concrete is deteriorating. That's going to be at city expense to repair that, but that should have been monitored. Someone should have watched that hole. I saw what WSSC did their first attempt on Boyd Avenue. They threw down a little piece of asphalt down on top of whatever they cut. It's an uneven surface. It's a small square about 2 feet by 2 feet, right again at the corner of Boyd and Carroll. And if that's an indication of the work that they're doing, you better be checking, because these are our streets. I realize Carroll Avenue, the section they're cutting up on Carroll, is not city property. I mean, but look at what they're doing to Lincoln. They're tearing the crap out of it. And that's our money. So please monitor, do whatever. Who in the city does check that? Does anybody in Public Works?
The WSSC has one person who, they have on-site inspectors, then they have somebody who's in charge of the overall project. We're in touch with him. There's then his boss who has come before the council and promised that he'll take a personal interest in making sure that things are done correctly.
You should ride a bicycle down the street.
The Public Works Director has gone out and met with them. I've gone out and met with them. I live on that block of Lincoln, so I had a particular interest in that.
Right.
And so I would say that we all recognize that some of the work that's being done is not being done to what we consider to be the standard.
It's not the replacement of what they cut up.
Right. And I know on Carroll Avenue that the asphalt that has been put down as they've been digging in the middle is temporary. They're going to be going back in there.
That's reassuring.
So
what about Lincoln?
we're very interested in making sure that the streets go back, in a way that will not impact residents.
I don't mean to take much more of your time, but I mean, whatever, there's a leak, a water leak that's in the corner of Columbia and Carroll Avenue that sometimes gets repaired, sometimes doesn't. It's a pain in the winter. And I don't, it's WSSC's responsibility, but it's a real danger at that intersection. It still hasn't been repaired.
My sense is that that's an underground stream. There are a number of those. it's frustrating.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Any other comments?
Good evening. My name is Jim DeLuigi. I live at 7106 13th Avenue. I am here just to talk briefly about the Junction area. Councilman Robinson has worked pretty diligently over the past few months to bring a couple of groups together, citizens groups. We had a subcommittee that worked on different ideas. Then we brought a larger group together looking at the situation. I think it's pretty clear at this point that the idea of creating roundabouts or traffic circles is not favored. Other ideas have been brought forward and are continuing to be evaluated and evolve into some specific, more specific types of recommendations. So when you meet with State Highway, we hope this message goes forward. We thank everyone for their participation and thank Councilman Robinson for his efforts so far. We hope the outcome is successful. There's a lot to be done. There are a lot of ideas on the table. There's a lot of potential development. There's the fire station. There's the city lot. But we definitely need safe pedestrian maneuverability in that area. And we all believe at this point that pedestrians are more important than vehicles. The circles that were initially proposed predominantly provide safety for vehicles, not for pedestrians. We hope we made that message clear, and we hope it goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Hume. I live on Carroll Avenue. I'm a resident of Ward 3. I'm also a business owner and a member of the Board of Directors of Historic Tacoma. I'm speaking to you tonight on a matter of great urgency to our neighborhoods here in Tacoma Park and around Tacoma Junction, as well as to the greater community, namely that of the proposed traffic circles to be built at the junction and immediately in front of the firehouse, as detailed in the study prepared by Kittleson and Associates for the State Highway Administration. This project, if carried out, would significantly alter or eliminate Tacoma Junction's Morrison Park, as well as the historic structure that sits on that site. It would also degrade or demolish historic residences adjoining the two traffic circles, likely turning our neighbors out of their homes. The traffic circles would alter traffic flow. They would harm the businesses currently operating at the junction and would divert through traffic into the neighborhoods, as has happened most recently in the St. Mary's County Route 234-238 traffic circle debacle. Traffic circles represent significant crossing obstacles to those with disabilities, and according to a study by the Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Commission, they cut fire engine cruising speeds by nearly 50%. Finally, the two circles, one at the junction and the other at Philadelphia and Carroll, would greatly increase the acreage of hot, impermeable asphalt and concrete in our neighborhoods, further contributing to an already unacceptable stormwater runoff situation around Sligo Creek. These traffic circles are a no-win, all-lose proposition, and they need to be rejected in no uncertain terms. I ask you tonight to respond to the State Highway Administration's consultants by affirming that you will not allow our historic park to be obliterated, truncated, or mutilated, and that our neighbors' homes will not be demolished. Tell the state that it is your intention to help our struggling junction businesses and not to marginalize them. Please pledge tonight that you will not throw up new barriers for the disabled, that you recognize the importance of our firefighters and that you will not hinder their important work. Take a step tonight that preserves green spaces and rejects asphalt, heat, and Chesapeake Bay pollution. In short, I ask you tonight not to wait, not to delay, and to inform the Highway Administration that we here in Tacoma Park intend to save our junction and not pave our junction. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we'll,
My name's Elaine Pearson with Historic Tacoma, and I'll be brief because you've obviously had a lot of comments tonight, and there's a lot to get through. I'm here for a couple things. One is the Tacoma Park Elementary School issue. I've had really a lot of calls from neighbors who are very concerned about this project, and just want to emphasize to you how important this project is to the neighborhood, to our community, and their concerns are very valid. The landscaping, the materials, retaining walls can be pretty horrendous, and I'm hoping that as we move forward with this and hear what's being presented, we'll be pleased. And I just want you to know Historic Tacoma is going to be talking with the neighbors to see how they feel, and we will also evaluate what's presented. And we ask you to please pay close attention to this, and let's get this done as well as we possibly can. The other thing I just want to say is I agree totally with what you just heard on the junction from John Hume and Jim DeLuigi. We're going to be speaking to you quite a bit more on the junction because, as you know, we're property owners there. We are very concerned about this outrageous Kittleson proposal and would like to see it kind of evaporate as quickly as possible and get down to the business of really finding a good solution for the junction. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, can you make it quick?
Just want to add one comment, that after the school presentation, there may be some neighbors or other people who haven't spoken on other topics such as traffic concerns, and hopefully there'll be a chance for them to comment if they feel like there's a need to. Thank you.
Okay. We will now move on to the city manager's comments.
In the interest of time, I'll just be very brief. I did just want to give the council an update on the community legacy funds that we had been awarded in 2003. This was an item the council had discussed earlier this year. Just very briefly, this was $300,000 that we had received from the state. About 5 years ago, it had been reprogrammed at the council's direction, basically to proceed with the streetscape along the commercial part of Carroll Avenue, as well as some funding that was set aside to address parking issues in the old Tacoma area. When the council talked about this in February, as you may recall, there had been something happening unexplained at the Board of Public Works, where what was supposed to be a grant had been sort of morphed into some different amounts between a grant and a loan. We have been waiting quite anxiously to actually get the contract from the state so we could move forward, particularly with the Carroll Avenue streetscape. And I am pleased to share with the council that we did receive that agreement in today's mail. I will be executing that. We believe that we have a contract that we can piggyback on, and basically we'll be bringing a contract forward for the council's consideration, most likely I think in May. So hopefully we may yet be able to get the Carroll Avenue streetscape project done by the end of this fiscal year.
And that's the area of Carroll Avenue near Westmoreland?
Yes. Okay. And that's it, unless there's any questions from the council.
Okay. We are now at the Tacoma Park Elementary School proposed addition presentation. Does anybody want to make any preliminary comments, or do you want the council to move down for a PowerPoint or?
Good evening. I'm Mike Spur, the architect for school facilities for Montgomery County Public Schools, and I brought the design team with me tonight, hopefully to answer all the questions that you have raised. When we were last here on December 3rd, we were in the schematic design portion of the building, and at that time, a lot of issues were raised by you folks that needed answers. We've continued to work on the project. We've met with park and planning staff. We've met with city staff, and continued on into the next phase of the project. At this point, we're in for mandatory referral approval and approval by city staff, and we have continued, as I said, we have continued to work on the project. Some issues that were raised tonight, we believe we already have the answers, but we'll be glad to share them with you. We intend to make this a successful project for MCPS as well as the city, so we intend to succeed. We're not here to be a detriment to the city. Other than that, I'm going to defer the rest of the time to the people that actually have the answers. So with that, if you'd like to come down, I'll introduce Gary Mosesman with Smolin Emmer Architects, and he'll do the PowerPoint.
Okay, so time for us to move down there now?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening. As Mike had mentioned, my name is Gary Mosesman. I'm with Smolin Emmer Associates Architects, and I'm the project architect, or actually the project manager on this project. And I'll try to cover the overall aspect of the project fairly briefly, and as we get through my part, I'm going to hand it over to Pat Welker, who is with AdTech Engineering, who's our civil engineer on this project, and then after that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris with VHB, who did the traffic study. So we can cover those three. Hopefully, those topics, and be able to answer most of the questions later on in comments from the council. And I said it would be brief. I can't rely on this pointer. We're looking at the existing site as it exists now, and just briefly, this is get your orientation here, Philadelphia Avenue, Holly Avenue, the existing school, the existing annex building that sits along Philadelphia Avenue. Currently, buses and parents come into the bus loop at this entrance here, with buses coming along this portion of the site, dropping students off to enter into the main entrance as well as into the multipurpose room, and then parents stacking up in the parent drop-off to drop-off students. We have students that enter the site and that come along down Philadelphia Avenue, come up Holly Avenue, obviously come down Holly Avenue, as well as access the back of the site. And as we get further along, Chris will be able to talk more about the traffic study and pedestrian circulation and where we're heading towards. Okay. This is the proposed, this slide here shows proposed site layout. And there's a lot of information on this slide here that there's been a lot of questions about, obviously, and a lot of concerns. I'm going to briefly talk about the overall site. And then as each of the team members comes up afterwards, we could talk more specific, or they're going to talk mainly briefly about each of the components, stormwater management, site circulation, and any other landscaping, a few of the topics. But in essence, what we're looking at doing is coming off of Philadelphia Avenue with a new bus loop entrance with one-way traffic, bringing the buses onto the site and coming up and around the new bus loop and dropping students off on the level down here so that students can enter into the school at the main entrance. And then by doing so, we have separated the parent drop-off, which now we propose to have two-way traffic at the existing out only, with cars coming in, being able to loop around, drop students off at the main entrance, as well as queue up in this space for pickups in the evening. Currently, what we currently show is the sidewalk coming, the existing sidewalk and a staircase, which is very difficult to see here, where we were able at the soonest point to access onto the proposed ADA sidewalk that we're bringing up along the site. And that's important to note that existing access to the site coming up Holly this way is not ADA accessible for people coming along Philadelphia Avenue. So here with this new proposed sidewalk, we have an ADA accessible access to the site down from down from Philadelphia Avenue. But in addition to that, there was concerns the last time we were here where we did not have this stair bisecting this distance between coming along Holly and having to walk all the way to this entrance. We've added this stair. There has been questions, and we've heard not only just tonight, but recently we've had a meeting with the city last week where there was a request about the possibility of adding a stair along this portion of the site. We're looking into that. There's been some discussion about the city giving permission for MCPS to come onto the site to try and make this successful, and that's something that's still in discussion and still looking at being designed. In addition to the last time we met, we've added access to the back of the site with a new paved connection to the existing entrance at the back of the site that comes off of, I believe that's Grant back here, and heads towards the elementary school and towards the existing building we're in. And then there's a piece of existing stair that comes on the back here. So we're looking at tying this in, and that's in, once again, response to input from the community. There are a couple things on this slide that are shown that have changed since we've submitted this to mandatory referral, and that was from input from the community as well as input from the city. One of the things that we looked at doing that has been done but is not reflected on this slide is that these two mulch areas here have been moved back. This piece here has been slid into this area here. MCPS has reduced the amount of blacktop area, and now this part of the mulch play area has been slid back into this area here. So now we're picking up more green space, obviously at the request from not only the parents of the school, but also from the rec department from the city, asking to try and give them more field. Another thing that we're looking at doing, and it's not really clear in here, there is a swale in here, in this area here, for stormwater management. Since we have to retain all the water on our site, which currently the school doesn't do, we have to maintain all the water runoff. We have to have swale down here. Now we're looking at different ways of engineering something where we can pull it back closer to the sidewalk and try to give more green space back to the school, more flat play area back to the school. As we continue on up the bus loop, we also show here we have parking down on the lower level, come around, and parking on the upper level of the site with proposed retaining wall along this portion of the parking lot. And currently at this time is proposed to be what's called a layback retaining wall, which is not a kind of a sheer, it's more of a soft eased slope up. And along this portion in between, we've shown currently plantings as well as at the front of the site here to buffer between Philadelphia Avenue and the proposed parking drive as well as the school site. In regards to the placement of the building, the pink area indicates the addition, the two-story addition that we're adding to the school. Excuse me. And the white area is obviously the existing facility. So we tried to pull the addition as tight as we could to the existing building, keeping it off the property lines as much as we can. We trying to use as much of the site as possible, but in addition to that, we still have to pull away from the site property lines for code reasons as well as also utility reasons. So we've compacted this addition as much as we could for the program requirements. Trying to make sure I've covered everything, just at least generally. Since the last time we're here, we had originally a sidewalk and ramp that came up along here and crossed, a stair that crossed came up here and crossed the existing bus loop, or the proposed bus loop. From the feedback from not only the community, but also from the city, we've removed that. There was concern that students would come up and just cross in the bus loop another time. So in actuality, since the last time, since this drawing has been created, there's been additional changes where this retaining wall is going to actually connect across where that little dot is trying to stay. And we're going to be reconnecting that piece here so that there's less of access and desire for students to head up and cross that area. This is an old a drawing that we had brought the last time. There's some revisions that have been made to this, but in essence, it just tries to give you an idea or a sense of what we're looking at. This section here is actually, back up one, is cutting the cross section at this point of the site, showing how the proposed retaining wall, and like I had mentioned previously in this slide, we were looking at having a straight vertical retaining wall, and now we're going to have more of a angled retaining wall because it's going to slope back. And with the plantings in between, in addition to the parking lot and more plantings down here, to try to provide some buffer and screening between this Philadelphia Avenue and the proposed parking lot areas. The other section is cutting a cross-section through the existing auxiliary building, which is going to be demolished. And it's once again showing that instead of having the view of the building, there's going to be more of a view of, we're going to have landscaping, once again a flat area, which is the bus loop, more landscaping. The wall is going to be laid back at this point, and parking on what's being called the upper parking level, but in essence is the bus loop continuing on. There's no parking on this side. That's just an error left over from the modification, actually left over from the last time we were here. Briefly go over how the addition is going to be attached to the school and what the addition comprises of. The addition is being added to the school mainly for a lot of the students that are already here at the school. Currently there's 8 portable classrooms on site, and then in addition to that, the staff uses, or the school uses, the auxiliary building for at least one classroom that I know of, and also for storage and also additional breakout space, in addition to the Morgan Daycare Center, which is also housed in that building. Plan here shows the ground floor elevation, main floor elevation, and upper floor elevation. I want to assume that many people have been inside the school and know that the school is a 3-level school, but is really kind of a 7-level split level building. Currently, what we're looking, this is looking at the main level. This is the main entrance of the existing school. Main office and multipurpose room shown here. And what we're looking at doing is tying in the addition to that level, which is the main level, so that we are picking up the additional classroom spaces that we need and holding it, as you can see, tight as possible to the existing building. This area here is the roof, which we'll look at in a second, of the proposed daycare component that's being added to the building. Looking at the lower level of the addition, which is at grade, it's going to be at the same level as the existing gymnasium. And what we're looking at here is having all the kindergarten and pre-K components down on this level so that they have direct access to grade, in addition to the component that I had mentioned previously, which is the child care facility, which is being added to the project as an add alternate and being funded by Montgomery County Health and Human Services. Just more update for idea of what we're looking at as far as materials and what the school is going to look like. At this point, we're looking at using brick on the exterior of the entire facade of the building, of the addition, in addition to trying to pick up some of the rhythm of the kind of residential scale of the window outline. And we'll look at, in a moment, we'll have a closer detail of the elevations because I know it's difficult to see at this point. But we're looking at using natural brick materials which tie into the existing school and also more of a historic character to it. As mentioned, once again, get more of a detailing idea. What we're looking at doing is having 2 different colors of brick, mainly dividing the building, with coins, kind of a coin look, if anybody's familiar with that, or rusticated look on the bottom of the base of the building, with a more smooth face brick on the top, a lighter brick, trying to marry back to the existing facility somewhat, and at least material, maybe not matching it in color. That's a difficult thing to do when you have a building of that age, and trying to tie into it at least, in color, but at least material-wise, we're looking at tying it in. And as I mentioned, more of a breaking up of the window into smaller components to give it more of a smaller scale to the neighborhood, in addition to a cornice, a little bit of a larger cornice on the top to try and once again tie into a neighborhood kind of feel to it, to the addition. At this time, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Pat from AdTech Engineering, who is the civil engineer on the project.
My name is Patrick Welker. I work for AdTech Engineers. I'm a civil engineer. I guess the good news about this project, because it is on an old site, there's no stormwater management existing on this site that controls any kind of flow off the site. So now we're putting this new building, we're able to treat and control this actual storm coming off the site. So basically, everything that goes onto the site will be treated and controlled, and then it will leave the site at a lower level, which means is that it will be stored in underground detention system, which is very large underground pipes, and they'll be released at a lower rate once the storm is over, which would right most of the ills, I should say, that all this fast flowing water, if it leaves the site, it'll control that and actually not burden the system like it is now. And as for landscaping, we basically use a lot of good shade trees, good pine trees for blocking of what you can see on the wall and stuff like that. So we've been working hand in hand with the arborist, the city arborist, to actually get what the city wants and what they need in order to make this an excellent site.
Back to me. I'm going to turn it over to Chris with VHB, who did the traffic study, and do you want me to jump over to you? Sure.
Thanks, Gary. My name is Chris Jagarapu, and I'm with Vanessa Hang and Breslin. We did the traffic study for Tacoma Park Elementary School. Our objectives were analyze the traffic conditions around the Tacoma Park Elementary School. Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission developed a scope to conduct the traffic study, and they wanted us to estimate the traffic volumes at 5 critical intersections, and they wanted us to do a level of service analysis of those intersections, review the pedestrian access to the school site, and also review the operations of the existing parent drop-off pickup loop and the bus loop. The 5 intersections that Park and Planning wanted us to review in addition to the school driveways were Piney Branch Road and Philadelphia Avenue, Piney Branch Road and Ray Drive, and the entrance to Tacoma Park Middle School, Holly Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue, Maple Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue, and the school driveways. At the request of the City Council and the city staff and the community, we also looked at the intersections of Birch Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue, Cedar Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue, and Hodges Lane and Holly Lane. The intersection of Cedar Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue is one of the critical ones. When I made my initial observations, that was one of the things that I wanted to include in the study. even though Park and Planning did not request us to review that intersection. And I'll tell you why in a few minutes. The existing site plan, Gary went over this in detail, and as someone mentioned in the audience, that there is a stair down here that connects to Philadelphia Avenue, and a lot of kids use that stair as well. The existing loop, just to point out a few things, the entrance at this location, both buses and the parents use that as an entrance, and they both egress further north on Holly Avenue. The school currently serves grades kindergarten through second grade. Core capacity is 270 students, and there are 8 portable classrooms on the school site. The current enrollment is about 402 students. There is 63 staff members, 56 full-time staff members, and 7 part-time. There is about 47 parking spaces in the school site today, and as I mentioned before, the entrance and egress of the loops are currently shared by both parents and the buses. Morgan Child Development Center provides daycare facility in the annex building of the school. There's about 40 children there with 6 staff members, and the timings for the daycare center start from 7 a.m. and I believe it goes up to 6 p.m. Most of the activity for the daycare center occurs between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. and in the evening after 5 p.m. I don't want to go too much in detail about the traffic volumes. We did turning movement counts at all the intersections that I mentioned before, the 8 critical intersections and the school driveways. I will give you a summary of what we observed. There were 140 vehicles that entered the school. Okay. Let me take a look at, I guess, Holly Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue. There's 11 cars that are turning left onto Holly Avenue towards the school, coming from Silver Spring, going towards Tacoma Park. And there's 225 cars that are going through and 10 cars that are turning right. And on Holly Avenue going northbound, there's about 27 cars that are making a left turn, 36 cars going through, and I believe 8 cars making a right turn. And going westbound, there's 1 car that made a left turn onto Holly Avenue, 451 cars that went through, and 40 cars that made a right turn. And coming south on Holly Avenue, 22 cars made a left turn, 19 cars went through, and 28 cars made a right turn. And all of these traffic volumes are the peak hour traffic volumes. And most of the traffic associated with the school occurs during the 15-minute period, just around when the school begins or when the school leaves. So when we captured the turning movement volumes, we captured them by 15-minute intervals, and found the peak hour for each intersection between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning. And we did evening peak hour counts from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And most of the school activity occurs before 4 p.m., so the evening traffic volumes were not as critical in relation with the school projections. There were 140 vehicles that entered the school, 54 vehicles by making a left turn into the school. Basically, they were coming from Grant Avenue. And there were 86 cars that were making a right turn into the school from Holly Avenue. There were several other locations that we noticed where parents were dropping their kids or where they were parking and walking to school. One of the locations was a city library parking lot just outside of this building. And we also noticed that few parents were using Grant Avenue to come down on Grant Avenue and park at the turnaround and walk some other kids from the back of the school through the playground. And parents were also parking on Holly Avenue if they can find a parking spot and walking their kids. During the peak hour, the 1 hour that we observed, or the 1 hour that we closely took a look at, 108 vehicles exited the school, the difference from 140 to 108 representing the staff that are parking on the school site. There were 15 buses that are serving the school today, and these buses, they also take students to Piney Branch Elementary School and East Silver Spring School. Some of the buses were carrying like 1 or 2 kids. I mean, they were coming there, dropping 1 or 2 kids and then leaving. That is probably because of the magnet program at the school. There is a lot of a good network of sidewalks that connect the school to the neighborhoods today, and there are crosswalks at the major intersections that are carrying pedestrians to the school. The crosswalks are all hatched, diagonally hatched, and then there are crossing guards during school hours. I listed 4 intersections there. I realize there are other intersections around this area that have other schools. The 4 intersections that are pretty close to the school and where we notice that children are walking to the school are Holly Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue, Piney Branch Road in Philadelphia Avenue, Cedar Avenue in Philadelphia Avenue, Maple Avenue in Philadelphia Avenue. One of the things that I was impressed with is the number of students that are walking to the school. I've done many school studies in this county, and there's a good number of students walking to the school, and that makes me feel good. I mean, it's a good thing that kids are walking to the school, and elementary school. I mean, I guess that's where it starts. So if kids are walking, I think that's a very good thing. The parents and bus loop, as I mentioned before, it's a shared entrance and egress, and currently the school staff are helping to not have spillbacks onto Holly Avenue or, further down to Holly and Philadelphia Avenue. The parent loop currently holds about 9 vehicles, and most of these parents, if I can go back to the screen real quick, I don't know if I can. Most of the parents use that portion to park and go and drop them. I mean, in the morning, the school staff help the parents to take the kids back to the school. But in the evening is when most of the spillbacks that I observed happen, because parents come, park their car, and then walk to the school to pick up their kid. And the school staff are putting some cones in the corner just so they don't allow any spillbacks, so that the buses will come in and go smoothly. We did notice some of the spillbacks at that location. The bus loop holds about 5 buses, and there were occasions where parents were they couldn't find a spot in the holding area, and they were not one of those 9 vehicles, so they had to go by the vehicles, make a loop again. So they kept making loops until they could find a spot. This is one of the pictures. I had several pictures. I mean, I couldn't put them in the presentation. It might become too long. So this is one of the situations where there were parents trying to get into the school lot and blocking the entrance for the buses to get in. The proposed site plan, parents have their own drop-off pickup loop, and the buses have their own one-way loop where they would enter from Philadelphia Avenue and exit from Holly Avenue. The plan here is slightly different from the plan that Gary showed you before, because I think there were several modifications to the plan, and the play field is different. I mean, it's not the same way as it's shown in this map. The current with the proposed site plan, what we did was we basically took the traffic counts at the eight intersections in the school driveways in 2008. We identified the background trips. Talking to Park and Planning Commission, there were no other background trips in this area that would impact the school site. And then we estimated additional school traffic based on the number of parents that are dropping their kids out today. For example, I mean, out of the 403 students, there were 132 parents, 108 parents that 108 vehicles that were observed leaving the school drop-off pickup loop. So we used that percentage to project it for 2010. The number of students talking to public schools, the number of students projected to enroll in 2010 is 435 students. But to be on the conservative side, we did our analysis based on the core capacity, which is 562 students. Some of the information here, I mean, we assume that we found out that there's no additional trips, as I mentioned before, from park and planning that would impact the school site. And the additional trips generated by the school are distributed based on the existing travel pattern. If we noticed a percentage of parents coming from Grant Avenue, we try to keep that percentage to the same. Excuse me. 50% of the existing staff and the additional staff are expected to use the parking around the proposed bus loop. The current parking lot holds about 47 spaces, and the proposed bus loop will have 46 spaces along the bus loop side. So we assume that 50% of the staff that were using Philadelphia Avenue to access the site would go and use the new parking area. And also the staff members that were using Holly Avenue or other locations to park their cars, because they can't find a spot, would go and use the new parking along the bus loop. These were the projected traffic volumes. Again, I don't want to go too much in detail. The summary from that is, again, we developed our traffic volumes based on 562 students, the core capacity. Yes, sir. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Yeah. There will be an additional 55 vehicles based on the number of trips that the school is currently generating. 10 of them would be teachers or the staff members for the additional 160 students. There would be 45 additional parents that would be driving to the school. And talking to Montgomery County Public Schools Transportation, they are planning to go through their buses again. Once the reorg is completed, the number of buses might go down, but we did not want to be underestimating. So we were on the conservative side, and we assumed that there will be an additional 3 buses that would add to the current 15 buses that are serving the school. The new proposed plan has 82 total parking spaces. And the daycare facility the current daycare facility in the annex building has 2 classrooms, and it's going to be scaled down to 1 classroom in the new addition, as Gary showed you before. And the enrollment is expected to reduce to 30 children. We did the critical lane volume analysis for these intersections as requested by Park and Planning. None of the intersections are close to the threshold. Park and Planning has a congestion threshold of 1,600 vehicles, critical lane volume, and the one intersection that came somewhat close to the 1,600 is Piney Branch Road in Philadelphia Avenue, which has about 1,244 critical lane volume. All other intersections were operating well under the 1,600 congestion limit. I know this does not sound right, but I mean, because when we drive on Philadelphia Avenue, the queues are long, and we did notice that traffic spills back from Piney Branch Road all the way to Maple Avenue along Philadelphia. I did some travel time runs. I wanted to do with and without school to see how that would impact, but when school's out, that adds to the traffic out there. Parents are also taking off and the school's out. So we really didn't have a clear distinguishing on how much the school impact is on travel time along Philadelphia Avenue. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. One of the difference between the Holly Avenue and the school exit one, currently it operates as exit only, but in the future would be enter and exit. So if you look at the Holly Avenue and school entrance, it has a critical lane volume of 143 in the existing. In the future, that entrance would become only exit. So none of the cars would be entering from there, and the intersection of the current exit is going to become entrance and egress. So that's the reason why the critical lane volume was higher there. We looked at the site distances exiting the school site. We also requested counties, the school bus operators to use the current entrance, even though it's a one-way. We wanted them to go there after school and then try to see if they can make the exit out of the school and see how it is. And they did not have any problems with the curb radii there to exit by making a left turn or right turn from the current entrance. These pictures here are looking to the left from the school current exit, which would be an entrance and exit, and as a proposed plan shows. The picture to your right is looking to the left, and you could see well close to Hodges Lane, and to the right you could see up to Grant Avenue. The bush here, the tree up here, I mean, it restricts the view a little bit because of parking. I mean, cars can pull up to the intersection, and when they pull up to the intersection, they could see all the way to Grant Avenue. The proposed parent loop is 450 feet long, and it can accommodate about 21 cars, and the bus loop is about 5,000 feet long, and it can accommodate 25 buses. This is critical because it provides an orderly movement of traffic on the school property. Currently, parents are trying to find a spot on Holly Avenue, find a spot in the school loop, and they have to adjust with the buses that are accessing the school as well. Holly Avenue is about 20 feet wide, and it has parking up from the school entrance, the current entrance, all the way to Grant Avenue. Parking is allowed on both sides. So it's not very wide, and most times cars yield to buses, buses yield to cars, and the crossing guard at the intersection of Holly and Philadelphia helps the buses a lot. They allow the buses to come in and leave the school. In terms of pedestrian facilities, I want to go back to the map and show you a few things. So I might bear with me when I go back these slides real quick. We've noticed that a lot of kids walk to school. One of the things that I noticed personally on several occasions was the path from Grant Avenue. I noticed about close to 30 students that were using that path to access the school from here. And I also noticed a lot of parents walking their kids from Holly Avenue coming to school, and people coming from Grant and walking to school as well. There were some students that were using the parking lot, the city library parking lot, parking their cars and then walking down here and then taking the stairs that are here currently. In the future plan, the ADA access along Philadelphia Avenue would be where the bus loop is, and I know it is a long loop, but I think it, as Gadi mentioned, provides an ADA access that is currently missing from Philadelphia Avenue. The stairs was one of the things that we requested even before that was put in. I think the city and the community requested these stairs as well. We also suggested trying to go as far to the east as possible, but because of the grades at that intersection, we don't want to create something that is difficult to use. We talked to the civil engineer, and they mentioned that it is pretty steep up there, but I think now we're back in the discussion trying to see how it's going to go. Pedestrians coming from Philadelphia Avenue trying to access the school will use the stairs and access the school from here. Pedestrians coming from Holly Avenue would not have to cross this way to come to school. I guess they would come on Holly Avenue and then access the school that way. One of the locations that we looked at closely was the entrance where buses, the current entrance where the buses are going to egress. There will be about 18 buses that would be leaving here. None of the staff members would be leaving during the morning peak when kids are coming to school. We wanted to make sure, I mean, looking at the corner radiuses here, we want to make sure that the kids are visible to the bus drivers and vice versa, and not to have any sight distance issues at that location, and I think that is not a problem there. I think I covered most of the pedestrian issues here. Currently, by providing this loop here and separating the bus entrance, we are creating a better situation for parents to stay and wait on the school property and not block on Holly Avenue. one of our recommendations that you'd see in the next slide is to take the parking away on Holly Avenue between the current entrance and Philadelphia Avenue. There's about 2 spots or three spots at that location that we recommend to be taken out. That road is too narrow. And looking at these properties adjacent to Holly Avenue here, they have a driveway and they can park there. And most of the parents are currently using these spaces in the morning and in the evening. So it would be better if we take those 3 spots away and allow the buses to access and to egress from the school without a conflict. All of the intersections, as I showed in the previous slide, they will operate under the congestion standard of 1600 from parking planning. And as I mentioned before, the new parent and bus loop is expected to relieve congestion on Holly Avenue. Site distances are adequate for all of the intersections, except Philadelphia Avenue and Cedar Avenue. This is exiting the parking lot outside of this building. When people are trying to make a left turn exiting this building parking lot, they have a bad site distance there. Talking to the crossing guards, one of the things that they wanted to see is to make the parking lot as a one-way loop exiting. It's not in the study area because the parking lot is in the city's property. We did not make a recommendation, but that's one of the things that the crossing guards wanted us to recommend. On-street parking along Holly Avenue between the Philadelphia Avenue and the proposed bus loop exit is recommended to be removed. Entering the school, I think this is one of the important things. At the intersection of Birch Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue, where the new entrance is going to be located, in the morning there will be 44 vehicles that will access the school from that entrance. 24 of them will be making a left turn and 20 of them will be making a right turn to enter the school. Traffic currently is slow between Philadelphia and Piney Branch all the way up to Maple and Philadelphia. One of the things that we recommend is to place signs along Philadelphia to not block that intersection, to allow people from Birch Avenue to get on into the school, and also for the buses to enter the school by making a left turn and also the right turn. I think that concludes my presentation. I'm going to give it back to Gary.
I think we've covered pretty much an overall look at the whole entire site. Right. Or you can just go ahead. Well, we can use this slide to show that. Mike had just mentioned that one of the things that the city had requested at a recent meeting was to add access to the site so that students coming down Holly Avenue do not have to cross this intersection here where parents are coming in and out. In the current situation that you see here, students would have to cross the intersection, come along down Holly and enter onto the site at this point. And at the city's request, to look at a different way, possibly of adding a sidewalk on this part of the site here so that students can come onto the site without having to cross this, the parents coming in and out, and then have a striped crossing along this portion of the site so that once again, so the students don't have to cross the parents coming and going to dropping off students and or picking up in the evening. So one of the things, and MCPS has obviously, and the design team thinks that's a great idea, and that's one of the changes that we've made to the plan since we've put together the slide here and after the mandatory referral submission went in. So currently, like I have mentioned, there is going to be a sidewalk here that's going to then allow students not to have to cross this intersection at this point. At that, I think, concludes our overall review of the project. And sure. Currently, I was under the impression the memorial tree was at this entrance. Is that what you're talking about? Correct. Yeah, and that's a tree that we can easily move and relocate on the site, and we plan to do that.
what I'd suggest is if the council has any other comments or questions, and then we'll take our break, and that'll provide an opportunity for anybody else who wants to ask questions of the folks who are here who made the presentation to do so while we take a break. So are there any, Councilmember Siemens and Councilmember Wright?
Thank you for the presentation, very helpful. Just one question that came to mind when I saw the plans for the interior of the building, and it's, the community likes to use the gymnasium when possible, and I just want to make sure that your plans do include isolation of the gym so that it can be used by the community during non-school hours.
Yes, even though the gym that's right now on the edge will kind of be in the hole
Right.
in the middle of the donut, we still have studied the hallways to make sure that it is separatable from the rest of the school so that the community can continue to use the building while the rest of the building's being cleaned.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
Thank you. First, I just had a follow-up question about the stormwater. When you guys were here previously, you talked about using a 10-year event to measure, I think, both the retaining on the site and it's not cleaning, but what was the term you used before?
So yeah, quantity control, 10-year.
Quantity and quality.
Yes, quality is you clean the water, quantity is you store the water.
So is that the standard, still the standard that's being used, 10-year?
Yes.
Okay. I would ask the county to think about using a standard that exceeds that based on two reasons. One, here in the community center, we actually used I know we're in a slightly different situation, we're in the floodplain, but we used a 100-year event, and that was demanded by the county. And then the second is to realize and acknowledge the fact that weather events are becoming more severe due to global warming. And so I might ask that the county consider, at least look at what the costs are associated with using a 15 or 20-year event to deal with the quantity as opposed to a 10-year.
Councilmember Klein? So you had more?
Yeah, I just had a few more questions.
You paused.
The second was just around parking. I just wanted to make sure I had the numbers correct. It seemed to me that there were, when the facility gets to maximum occupation, there's 73 staff plus whatever staff the daycare has. So now they have 6. If they continue with that 6, you're up at around 79. And what is the total number of parking spaces on the site?
The daycare is actually going to drop down to 3 because there's going to be 1 classroom. Currently, they have 2 classrooms. So right now, the maximum amount of spaces we were able to get on the site was 80. So currently, we show 80 spaces on the site.
So 80, and that means there'll be 76 staff on the site when it's fully up and running, I guess.
I believe so.
Or fully occupied. And so were those four spaces will be for parent pickup and drop off? Is that correct?
They could be for visitor, for volunteers, however the school decides to use those spaces. Currently, this is a very, very tight site, as we're all aware, and actually MCPS standards are to have more spaces on the site. Unfortunately, we're unable to accommodate that. And we would love to even provide less spaces because then we could provide more green space, but we do need to at least provide 80 spaces minimum is what MCPS has requested.
So I guess I just asked this because I think it pertains to the traffic issue in pickup and drop off for parents, because they're not going to be able to, they'll just be able to wait along the parent drop off, correct?
That's correct. There'll be a longer queue for the parents to wait.
But they won't be able to park to get out and take their kid in or
Yeah, if you look at the existing drop-off for the buses is wide enough for one car to stop and another car to get by. So there'll be spaces there where parents could drop off a student or get out and go inside and get a student and then proceed on, in addition to parking in the bus in the front portion of the site also.
Okay. Related to traffic, I am a little concerned about eliminating the parking on both sides of Philadelphia between the drop-off and, on Holly, between the drop-off Philadelphia, isn't that what I heard? Between where the bus loop exits and...
I'll let Chris, I think what he was talking about is when you come up Holly Avenue from Philadelphia on the right-hand side, there are 3 spaces currently where people park, and they, parents either dropping off kids or staff park there because it's the only space they can get. And what I believe VHB has recommended is that those 3 spaces be removed.
So it's just on one side of that stretch of road?
That's
not
correct.
both? Okay, I misinterpreted. So, because I think we need to leave some parking there for visitors to the houses. And then lastly, I would say, I think the concern about how it's visually going to look is critical. And so I know it's a lot of details, and I appreciate you guys going over the details with us. But as we move forward, I just hope we can continue to get updates on the details of what the retaining wall materials are going to be, what the plantings will be, both when they go in and in 5 years, and those sorts of things. And then lastly, I just want to thank you. I think you guys have put in a pretty impressive effort in terms of listening to the community and making a lot of adjustments around green space and bus loop and the traffic issues. So thanks.
Councilmember Fly.
I would also like to thank you for all the work that you've done and the modifications that you've made to the plan. I really appreciate it. I have a kid who's in kindergarten at Tacoma Park Elementary School, and I moved here from California, which is a long way to come, to go to school, have my kids go to school here in this community. I am one of those parents who's looking for an alternative for my kid for the 2nd grade year. The idea of a 45-minute bus ride each way just isn't working for me. When I talk to my kid after school, one of her worst times is actually the ride to school on the bus, and it only lasts less than 10 minutes now. So the idea of extending that ride to 45 minutes is not very appealing. And today I got a call from the school, and my kid had been hit in the head with a ball. And I don't have to go home to get my car because I commute by public transit to work. I'd have to go home to get my car, and then I'd have to get to my car and then drive myself to Bethesda to go get her if anything happened. And I don't want to take my car downtown D.C. for a year for this. So just functionally for me as a parent, the idea of having my kid go that far doesn't appeal to me. I have an older kid too, and we had the option of having her test for the program where you send the kids to the Center for the Highly Gifted, and also chose not to even try to participate in that because I don't want to send my kid on a bus that long. I really believe in community schools in the quarter-mile catchment district for the elementary school, and it's one of the great things about this neighborhood. It has the sidewalks in that area that people can walk. So, I still haven't heard what I think is any kind of a real effort to do something other than send the kids to Bethesda. So while I appreciate the design changes, I would also appreciate a little bit of effort relative to keeping the kids closer in this community. I would like to see you do something like put the 2nd graders at Piney Branch for that year and find a spot for the kindergartners and 1st graders, maybe at the college.
Unfortunately, I can't speak to that. I'll have to turn it over to MCPS.
We have investigated all the alternatives that were suggested to us during the fall meetings. We did take them seriously. We wrote them down. We looked into each one, and the commute to the holding facility with the whole school staying intact is determined to be the best method for maintaining the way of the school, as well as just the logistics of the whole situation. Remember that this is instead of being on site in a construction project that was going to last 3.5 to 4 years because it was going to be so difficult to build. So that's what we're comparing it to, not because we felt like everybody should ride a bus every day instead of walking to neighborhood school. The 1 year of pain is worth it to get the next 40, 50 years of a really good facility in the middle of town.
1 year having my kid go someplace else is worth it to me, to not have her go the 45 minutes and be so disconnected from her.
I understand.
Senior moment.
Senior moment, yeah, that's true. No, I'll
Anybody else? Thank you all very much. Looks like you're continuing to listen to what I'm sure is a lot of input, and I'm sure you'll continue to do that, and we'll get the best results that we can get. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll now take a break. We'll reconvene when that clock in the back says 9:30. regular meeting agenda. We have 3 short voting items. First up is single reading ordinance authorizing upgrade to the Public Works phone system. And Abel Castillo is here to tell us anything, answer any questions. Do you need to tell us anything?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. There's a typo.
Oh, it's really $182,000.
No, it's really redundant phone lines, not power lines, on that first paragraph under the background. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. It's something that's in our capital
budget.
Yeah. And we've secured a GSA pricing from Clear Connections. They're familiar with our system. They've done other work for us too. So I'm willing to answer any questions.
First off, before I forget, would somebody like to
I move the ordinance.
Second. Moved by Councilmember Clegg, seconded by Councilmember Sniffle. Yeah, comments? Councilmember Wright?
I just had a quick question, whether this will have any impact on the proposed redo or redevelopment of the Public Works facilities. Is this something we should be waiting for until we have the plan around those facilities? Or do we need to do it anyway, and there won't be a chance we have to spend the money again in some way after we've spent the $2 million in the facilities?
I don't think the phone system's going to change that much there, even with the renovation or whatever you plan there.
So we wouldn't be pulling a whole bunch of wire or anything that would have to be redone?
If you're going to pull wires, you would pull it to the location where this is at, because this isn't a mechanical. This is in a server room, in the electrical room of the main building.
But is it possible that, I mean, $2 million is a lot, so I assume we're not just gutting the facility, and we might actually design the facility and put rooms in different places and functions in different places?
Hey, well, you're the technology expert, but it's really more a matter of the actual kind of software guts of the phone system rather than...
They need this pretty bad. So I don't think it's going to be something that we can wait until that design or the thing gets implemented. I'm not sure how much you're going to spend, but the phone system is going to be there. The enhancements that we're doing to the existing device will be available for when you have the new construction. I don't think that area is going to change that much, because that area is where the electrical to the building comes. That's where everything happens. So if you're going to build in the same structure, I'm not sure what the plans are right now for that. I haven't seen anything. I've only seen preliminary drawings. And the drawings that I've seen, that building stays, most of it stays like it is. If that changes, then you're not going to spend that's $12,000 to wait. Would probably would limit the services there. They're already suffering as far as the system's down sometimes, and there's no redundancy. What this will do also, it gets us ready for making Public Works a redundant site for a lot of our data also, because it's going to use data circuits primarily, and then redundant phone lines to take over when the data circuits are not available. That's the idea there.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you. If I can follow up on Councilmember Wright's question, is it fair to say that if we make this purchase and then we completely change the buildings, you have to take the equipment and move it somewhere else, that the only additional expense would be repulling phone lines, that the equipment would still be the same?
The equipment could be the same unless greater capacity is needed, more phone lines. They have to get more equipment in.
But what we purchase now would still be usable?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And the other question I had, I think I know the answer, but I'd rather have you tell me that, and that is, I know that We've had past problems with phone lines coming to Public Works, and also on down Ritchie Avenue. Once again, we've added 3 new homes on Ritchie Avenue, so they're back to using the phone lines that don't work in the rain. I happen to be selected this time for one of those phone lines. But is this going to increase the need for phone lines going into Public Works?
Yeah. That area is really weak. The Verizon infrastructure there, it's not going to increase the amount of power line, of phone lines going in. We already have a fax machine phone line and a couple of other phone lines that are doing temperature controls. We're going to use those as backups. You're not faxing all the time. You're not doing. So they're just sitting there right now.
When you add phone lines to Public Works, I suffer.
Oh, I bet. Everybody on that street.
Yeah.
The idea there, I believe Verizon's planning on putting fiber through that area.
Right.
I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know what time.
I believe Verizon is to have fiber to the whole city by
August,
July.
Yeah, something like that.
So it's soon.
So it's going to get better.
Any other questions? Councilmember Snipper.
I noticed you have voice over IP coming, is that right?
Right. We're going to make it all voice over IP.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Any other questions? Are there any citizen comments? Okay. Single reading ordinance. Will clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Williams.
Aye.
Councilmember Berry.
Aye.
Councilmember Clay.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Snipper.
Aye.
Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
That passes. Next item is first reading ordinance authorizing FY08 budget amendment number 3. Thank you.
Move the ordinance.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Clay, seconded by Councilmember Wright. City manager want to make any quick comments on this?
Sure. Just for the benefit of those who may not have this agenda item before them, this will be the third amendment to the fiscal 2008 budget. Just very briefly, the items that are included in this would be a second bulk buy tree sale. This was something that the Public Works Department had done this fall. It was very successful, so they would like to do another bulk buy tree sale this spring. Additionally, the city arborist has asked that the council appropriate money from the tree planting fund, which is something that folks contribute to in lieu of when they remove trees, and rather than plant trees, he would like to do some additional planting this fiscal year, both in Ward 6 around Jecky Park, Spring Park, and Forest Park. In the capital budget, we had $65,000 that the council had appropriated in the original budget for neighborhood commercial center improvements. As you may recall, one of the projects that we undertook this fiscal year was the kind of going in the various neighborhoods, talking about the master plans and getting community feedback. One of the items that came up through that process was a desire on the part of the community to hold a series of concerts in the Junction area. That's clearly not a capital expenditure, so if we were to move forward with that, some monies would need to be transferred from the capital budget to the operating budget so that that could move forward. Probably the most significant item that is included in the proposed budget amendment is the replacement of a skid steer or bobcat in the Public Works Department. This is an item that is actually in my proposed budget for fiscal year 2009. Unfortunately, our bobcat did not quite eke its way into the next fiscal year. It's already died. And it would be very expensive to repair it, as well as basically we would be starting incurring rental charges as we move forward in the rest of this construction season. This is one of our most heavily used pieces of equipment. In discussing this with the Public Works Director, what we would recommend is that we go ahead and move forward with the replacement of that this fiscal year. There is a contract that we have identified we could piggyback off of. So it's really just a matter of timing. Basically moving the item from the next year budget to this year's budget. It is an equipment replacement reserve item. It is not something that is paid for out of general operating monies. The last changes that would be covered by the proposed budget amendment involve some grants which are captured in the special revenue funds. At the time that the council had adopted the budget last June, We had anticipated receiving $25,000 from the Montgomery County Collaboration Council for the CSAFE initiative. We knew that was somewhat speculative at the time, but we were hopeful that funding would continue. Unfortunately, that is not the case. However, the Collaboration Council has awarded a $3,480 grant to CSAFE. It's essentially a Train the Trainers program in conjunction with the Montgomery County Public Schools as part of the Gang Awareness Initiative. And then last, the Tacoma Foundation did give some money to the Crossroads Market to supplement the funding they had received from the Project for Public Spaces, and the budget amendment that is before the council this evening would recognize the $1,000 that the Crossroads Farmers Market got. For those who may not recall, the city is essentially acting as a fiscal agent for the Crossroads Farmers Market. We were essentially the recipient for the grant funding and basically disperse the monies to the market. And so if there's any questions, but in a nutshell, that's what's included in the budget amendment before you.
Any questions or comments? I've just got a quick comment that I don't believe most people would remember that when the Bobcat was purchased, it was an emergency procurement.
It was back in 1996, so you have a great memory, Mayor Williams.
It was for snowstorms, and it was needed for basically getting snow out of narrow streets and cul-de-sacs and parking lots and fitting between parked cars that were stuck. And it was, there was one available, and it was purchased on about a 1-week turnaround of identified need, and it was here. So that skid steer is used to not behaving well with the budget.
It's not.
Are there any public comments? Okay, this is a first reading ordinance. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Next item is the resolution authorizing submission of the 2008-2009 Safe Routes to School program application. And Sarah Daines is going to give us a brief description.
The City Council is being asked to consider this evening an application for a third round of funding through the Safe Routes to School program. At this point in time, we've been fairly successful securing about $275,000 for a variety of projects, including the event that Mayor Williams spoke about earlier in the meeting that was held this weekend. What we're hoping to do is to submit a third application for $147,570, which would fund 3 general projects. The first would be a continuation of the Safe Routes to School programming and events that we've been doing with the able assistance of Lucy Meir, who more or less organized the event on Saturday. That would be roughly $37,500 of the grant request, and would include a variety of activities ranging from the Walk to School Day that involves 3 area schools near the community center, a series of bicycle rodeos in partnership with the Washington Area Bicycle Association. We're going to try a fun run and a bike race this time, and then a variety of other educational and outreach programs targeted to school-age children and their parents with the intent of encouraging them to walk or bike safely to school. A second component would be the installation of roughly 10,000 square feet of sidewalks. The specific location of that has not yet been determined. It'll be based on the outcome of a sidewalk inventory that is planned for the second grant funds. Roughly $90,000 have been budgeted for the installation of sidewalks. One of the sidewalks that was installed as part of the first project was a sidewalk up here on Grant Avenue by the middle school, between the middle school and the community center. And the second one is planned over on Maple Avenue. Excuse me. And the third component is additional traffic enforcement near the schools, working in partnership with the police department. Roughly $20,000 has been budgeted for that, and that would cover the overtime costs associated with having additional law enforcement officers out on the streets during the times the school is letting out and convening.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to move it? Okay, moved by Councilmember Snipper. Second. Seconded by Councilmember Simmons. Any discussion? Councilmember Clay.
10,000 square feet of sidewalks.
I know, I don't really know how long that actually is.
Well, I'm not concerned. I'm
3,000 plus.
There's sidewalks. But every time I hear talk about sidewalks related to safe routes to school, it's always about the immediate vicinity of the school, and not about areas along the bus routes or for other kids who are walking. So, for example, I know a couple kids in my neighborhood that walk to school so that they can catch that early morning bus to the Center for the Highly Gifted in 4th and 5th grade. And they have a really hard time crossing over Carroll Avenue, for example. And there's not really a very safe way for kids from that community to get across Carroll Avenue from Lincoln, Boyd. There isn't really a place until you have to go all the way up, I think up by the Manor Circle, kind of Sherman area. The crosswalk light area at the junction is treacherous. And most of the kids, of course, end up on either Boyd or Lincoln, and usually Lincoln, because that's the way they can get straight across, and it's incredibly dangerous to cross there. I'm even afraid to cross there in my giant car. So I don't know if we're going to be looking at some of the areas that are not within 2 blocks of the school for sidewalks and other improvements or not.
The way the program is set up, it's within 2 miles of a participating school, which basically covers the entire city of Tacoma Park. What we're doing with the second round of funding is using those dollars to supplement community development block grant funds that were allocated for an ADA accessibility study. And we're also helping to partner with the State Highway Administration on a pilot program that would inventory, evaluate, rate sidewalks, existing and missing sidewalks, to improve people's pedestrian safety and access to various sites within the community. So it's a long answer to your question, but yes, we'll be looking at places outside of the immediate area of the schools. There's no specific recommendation at this point in time until we get that inventory and evaluation completed. It's sort of counterproductive in terms of putting in a sidewalk that may be rated low after all this process and not having the funding for the higher rated ones.
Great. Well, I would love to see some of the sidewalks in this round go a little farther out from the school.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you. And I guess my comment is more directed to the city manager because it's on item number 3, the additional traffic enforcement near schools included in the program area. I'm hesitant to add money to the police budget to do what I think they should be doing now, but I don't see them doing a lot, and that is enforcement of traffic laws in and around our schools. And I'll just say that I hope this sets a precedent in the way they do the enforcement activities in the future. So I guess in that sense I would support this, but it has bothered me that we don't see more enforcement in the school areas.
I can certainly share that comment with Chief Rakucci. Obviously, there's a lot of demands throughout the city. I think it's not uncommon under other grant programs that if we want kind of heightened up enforcement, it doesn't mean it's not part of their normal responsibility, but I can think of some of the weed and seed money that has been used to do additional traffic enforcement beyond that we customarily do. So I do appreciate the concern, Councilmember Siemens, and I'll share that with the Chief.
Thank you.
I'd just add to that, if I may, that with 4 or 5 officers on the street as part of any given shift, the department has been asked by all of us to pay much closer attention to the cut-through traffic and other issues around the city. And I noticed that in the weekly reports, the number of stops and citations issued has gone up substantially in response to that request. And if we're going to shift the emphasis yet again away from the cut-through traffic and the traffic calming concerns and strategies that we have developed over time throughout the entire city, then it's going to require yet again another redistribution of the amount of officers on the street who are in fact dedicated to traffic enforcement. So it sounds to me like if we want the extra enforcement around the schools, we're going to have to pay a little bit more for it, or we're going to have to change what has been a priority of the council.
Any other comments? Any public comments? Okay. It's a resolution. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. All right. We're now moving to our work session, and if I can get a quick check from people, we have the discussion of the preliminary comments regarding the Montgomery College Facilities Master Plan. We also have another item on there that is work session discussion of the elementary school proposed addition. It strikes me that we may have kind of finished with that item, as we had questions during and after the presentation. Does anybody feel like we still need to do something with that? I just want to give a sense of whether we have much on the agenda after this next item. Councilmember Wright.
I would just be interested in two things. One is understanding what the process is going forward. Like, are we, as a city, submitting anything specific in writing to MPUCS? And then also, specifically, I think the request that Susan Montgomery made ties into Colleen's issue, which is actually getting the decision makers around, because the architects here aren't really the decision makers around what the transportation plan is and the transition plan. So getting those decision makers here, I think would be important. So those would be my two.
Okay, so it sounds like we might have a 5-minute discussion on that as a last agenda item. So Sarah Daines is here. We have two folks from the college, and we have the chair of MCNAC, and we have representatives from North Tacoma, and we also have other staff here. Let me just start off by saying that the reason this is on the agenda now is that when Councilmember Wright and I were talking with folks from the college, we asked if it would be appropriate to provide any preliminary comments as the college is going forward with its process with the two charrettes, one in April and one in May, and we're told that, yes, it would be helpful with any preliminary comments. So we recognize that they are preliminary and that the college is still going forward with its process. I know from looking at the minutes that we approved earlier this evening that when MCNAC came before us in February and presented their report, one of the things that was the next step was that MCNAC was going to present their report to North Tacoma, and I know that that was scheduled for a week or so ago, but there was an attempt to schedule it for a week or so ago, but that did not happen, so that my sense is that that still needs to happen so that we can get some feedback on the report from the neighborhood and get more public involved in this discussion. So with that, maybe Sarah, do you have any comments? And then one of the things that I wanted to do was to get a quick update from somebody from the college on just where you are in your process. So did you want to?
No. Basically what we had tried to do, because the committee had made 8 specific recommendations, and what we thought we would do for ease of conversation was to break it down into 4 general themes without going into the specifics, to give you sort of a framework in which to discuss the proposal. The first was to redevelop the college-owned property that's east of New York Avenue for residential purposes. If you're familiar with the campus, there are a number of smaller facilities on the east side of New York Avenue that are interspersed with a variety of residential properties. They're proposing that that entire block be redeveloped for residential purposes solely. The second general recommendation was a westwardly expansion of the campus to the other side of New York Avenue. The third recommendation was to the development of a sustainable campus through a variety of different methods. And then last was the creation of a city and college partnership. As Mayor Williams has indicated, there are representatives from Montgomery College here, as well as Francis Phipps, who is the chair of McNack. I think that's it as far as the committee itself, as well as Jim Evans with North Tacoma.
Right. Maybe would somebody from the college just kind of give us a quick sense of where you are in your process at this point?
Good evening. My name is David Kapp. I'm the college's Associate Vice President for College Facilities and thus in charge of the Facilities Master Plan update for the college. Where are we? We've just finished about 1.5 years of data collection for our enrollment projections, matching that with our space deficits down to the discipline level, finding out the minute details of which program's growing, which one is shrinking. And we've just completed that and turned that over to an architect firm by the name of Cho, Ben & Holbeck. And the purpose of that process is to provide those architects on all 3 campuses the opportunity to start looking at what types of buildings need to grow or what types of programs need to grow or shrink, and then affecting the square footage of the buildings. So we've done that, and the architect team has met with each one of the campus provost, deans, and chairs to get their input on their thoughts of what they think is growing and what they think is shrinking and what they think their issues are with various buildings and what their options are. We also, at the same time, we're scheduling community outreach, and in Tacoma Park in particular, we did that last week. I've met with there's about 19 people that signed in, and brought down David Ben, the principal with Cho, Ben & Holbeck, and spent about 3.5 hours, 4 hours with the community, and it was our reporting back to them what we thought we saw as the growth between where we were 2002 to 2012 to where we are now, which is 2006 to 16, and the difference between those two. Presented that to the community, and then let it have an open back and forth what the community thought would be good, what the community thought would be bad in terms of options that the architect should to look at. And I'm doing the same thing at Rockville Community tomorrow night, and we've already done it with Germantown. So we've done an internal report and collection of information. Now we've done a community report, the next collection of communication, and within about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, or over the course of the next 4 weeks, we're going to go back to the 3 campuses again to report back on what we've received for input and start to lay out some options and let people do some brainstorming work. Get through the campuses with that, then we're going to bring that back to the community members and let them look at what the feedback has been from the college and from the community and what options we think are out there based upon what everybody's feedback was. And that doesn't mean that any option is perfect or any option is not perfect. There's usually 3 or 4 options, and then the one everybody likes is a merging of one or the other. But where Cho, Ben & Holbeck will be developing those options so we can come back down to the community down here. We talked about at the session last week coming down mid-June and trying to do that and have another open house, open forum. This is what we learned, this is what we know, this is what you said, and this is how we incorporated it between what you said and what the college's campus's leadership and chairs and deans have said, and here's some options, and what do y'all think about that? And that's where we are. Get through that through the summer, and then hopefully take those options to our president and board of trustees come July, August, and so we can get feedback from them, because we haven't done that yet. And once we get the feedback from which we'll provide to the president and the board of trustees, what options are and what people think of each of the options, might be able to narrow that down to a recommended option, which we then can bring back to the community come late fall, early winter. And then we'd be on track to wrap it up and make presentations and send it up to Maryland Higher. Our deadline is Maryland Higher Education by 1 February. So that's the track we're heading on. And we're on track to do that. So.
And that would be to give them a funding request or give them approval of master plan?
Yes, sir. The master plan itself is not a funding vehicle, but any project for any of the 3 campuses that you want to go on and ask for funding in your CIP, it has to be represented in the master plan. Again, not to bore you to death, but really the purpose of our master plan, unlike the one that goes in front of mandatory referral for park and planning or down for here, I imagine, our master plan is really driven by enrollment projections, which drive your space deficits down to the discipline level, which then starts telling you what types of buildings you need to have in the future, the 10-year time window we're looking at.
Okay.
So that's the master plan, and then from that, you will decide which specific building project is the first one, second one, or third one out of the gate, and what size that building should be, and what discipline that building should be, and that's what you'll build your program from, and then that'll be your funding request. So the master plan is a 10-year look that your first building out of that master plan might be 4 or 5 years down the road, because you have to make the determination which the first building is, and then the size of that building, what the program is in it, and move forward from that. For instance, the Rockville Science Building, which we just are getting funding for construction now, I've been here 8 years, and we started working on the program out of the master plan for that one 8 years ago. So it takes about 6 years to get to the point of from master plan through programming, design request, construction request. And so we're building that master plan, which will drive the rest of the train.
And it sounds like you're trying to do a 10-year master plan, but you keep looking at it in smaller increments than that and sliding the 10-year piece forward like every couple of years.
Yes, sir. It's a 10-year master plan. That's a requirement from the state of Maryland. And in this particular case, we're looking at the data from 2006 enrollment projections out to 2016. So there's your 10 years. But every year, we submit to the state of Maryland, to MHEC, a 5-year CIP. And just to make things confusing, every 2 years, we submit a 6-year CIP to the county. And then those roll every year. So we're getting ready to do the FY10 bond bill request to the state of Maryland, and that'll go 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And that gets done every year. It rolls forward every year. And the one to the county, since the county's on a biennial CIP process, it's a 6-year process, and every 2 years it gets redone again. And that's why your master plan is important, because that 10-year master plan drives that 5-year and 6-year CIP, and you got to make sure that's all synced together, or, you know, elected officials certainly don't want you to come up and talk to them about 1 year I want a science building for $50 million, and then you scratch your head next year, I don't want that science building, I want a gym for $40 million. So fortunately, we've not done that. We are pretty consistent, and we have been working down at the Tacoma Park campus on the master plan that was developed in 2002 to 12. So that really is your strategic vision for what buildings you should be looking at, and that drives your CIPs. And it's good to have all the input and options and head you in that direction. So I hope that helped. It's not the funding tool itself, but it drives you for those funding tools, which is the CIPs.
Okay. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. As I understand the way you describe it, then the master plan itself talks about your curriculum and what you're going to need in the future, and then helps you to prioritize how you're going to spend your money, or what money you're going to need to build those facilities to meet your goals that are set out in the master plan. But as I understand it, the way you describe it, that doesn't say specifically where buildings are going to be located and kind of what the priority is for locating the different facilities that you identify in the master plan.
Well, actually, yes, sir. It does lay out, not in extreme detail, but it does put buildings on the ground in locations. So it's not a surveyed tool where it tells you exactly this is going to be the footprint of the building, but it may take the most current building, which is really not applicable to y'all, but at Rockville, it's a 140,000 square foot science building. The master plan didn't tell us exactly where that building was going to be, but it gave a pretty good idea of where that building is going to be. And then when we hired the architect team to actually design that, like the architects you saw tonight, to really design that building, we turned over to them the program that said, this is how many labs you need, this is how many offices you need, this is how many recitation rooms you need, this is how many bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the program. And with that program, and we said, and here's the general location where that building, as directed by the master plan, should be. General location. Now that architect team said, let's figure out exactly what that building's going to look like and exactly where it's going to be. And they may have shifted it. Up in Rockville's example, we probably moved it about 60 feet in one direction and pushed it up against another building.
For Tacoma Park's example, that lab would be designated in the master plan as being in block 69, maybe.
It might, yes, sir. That'd be, I mean, to be at the most extreme example, that's what you would say. It would say it's going to be on this side of the road, or that side of the road, or over on the eastern or western side of the railroad tracks, or that general type location, but not exactly where the building's going to be. But in general, yes, that would tell you. So that, yes, that's a very good way to put it, because you know, that would be something y'all be interested in.
Right.
Where do you think you're going to build the next
And that's
building?
what we're trying to, or what I'm trying to see is, you know, you've got a lot of work ahead of you, and I don't want to be interested in all of it, but I want to be interested in that that's going to
Yes.
affect the residents of Tacoma
Yes.
Park.
Yes, and that was the discussion we had exactly the other night with the residents. What do you think about if a building was here? What do you think about if a future building was here? And what do you think what is your other thought if none of those choices was it? So folks gave us input on, and it wasn't just us saying, what do you think of this building going here? We said, no, if that doesn't work, what do you think is your idea? And I'm not saying everybody's going to accept all those ideas, but we did go back and forth for that. And there was a lot of discussion on what buildings should be where in the future.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barry.
Yes, just a comment and then a question. And the comment is that I don't think that there's any reason to believe that at any time in the future the traditional model of the campus as a cluster is likely to change. But like so many things, when real estate is hard to come by, especially in a highly developed area like we have here, it might be worth, in some future master plan, thinking about the campus as an extended entity that might have some programs beyond the traditional and current campus cluster. And I'm speaking in particular about the opposite side of the city, where along the New Hampshire corridor there's a lot of property that is vacant or undeveloped. Same thing is true along University on the way to the University of Maryland flagship campus. And I'm thinking about programs like sociology or certain kinds of educational programs, College of Education, and also workplace training. And it would seem that it might be worth considering a mile or two away from where you are now, some development in the future. And then that brings me to the question, and it is, interestingly, you mentioned before that you study the kinds of programs that are ascending and those that are losing students, and therefore you may have to drop or eliminate. Could you just briefly give us a sense of what you're learning there? That is, what kinds of programs now and in the future are likely to have substantial growth and those that are sort of falling by the wayside?
I'll start with your first question, which was the distance learning, and answer that. And then as we get into program growth or shrinkage, I'd like to ask Dr. Stewart to come up, because I'm the physical kind of guy, you know, this building here and there. But as far as the academic areas of expertise, Dr. Stewart is it, although our data is the data collectors work with the master plan folks. But the distance thing, the distance and away from the campus, the college current enrollment and projection shows about a 5% of our credit hours that are generated on an annual basis are in distance learning. So that's either you can correct me on this one if I'm wrong, I think that's a straight distance learning class. There's two types of classes that take place, two types of classes for a credit program. One is fully distance learning, meaning the student may or may not ever meet the teacher, instructor on the campus. Now, we found out those students do come to campus, to the bookstore, to the cafeteria, and to the library as it is, but they may take distance learning. And then there's hybrid courses, and that means it might be a 3-credit-hour course, and so you have it Monday and Wednesday. Maybe Monday you're on a campus, and Wednesday you're not even coming on campus. 5% of our enrollment credit hours are on that second type, the hybrid, or no, on the first type, on the full-time distance learning. So that's one type of program that's not directly in a building on a campus. The second is our workforce development and continuing education. Our master plan has 5 parts, just very quickly, 1 for each of the campuses, Tacoma Park, Germantown, and Rockville. And then the 4th part of it is our workforce development and continuing education. Our enrollment for workforce development and continuing education college-wide is equivalent to the size of all 3 campuses' credit hours. So if it's 25,000 credit hours, there's 25 to 27,000 non-credit hours. We have a large contingent at Gaithersburg, Wheaton, Fenton Street, up a little bit north, and on each of the 3 campuses. And George Payne, who is our provost for workforce development, is continually working on where his next growth area is, and he's already looking to the eastern portion of this county to move into. And he's a much more flexible than us, because he doesn't physically have to be with us. He can go out and lease space, and then he generates the revenue to pay for his leases. So he's always in a growth mode, and he's grown tremendously in the short time I've been here. So that's a type of environment where you move off of the campus and you can offer non-credit courses like that. And we do have some credit courses off campus, but the struggle with there is if you have a typical student that's on the campus taking nursing, for instance, you want to have the nurse, her or him, biology class on the campus and some of your basic ed classes, and then you want to go to the nursing. You don't want to send them somewhere else for one of those core courses. So there's a group of students that stay on the campus and move about to their various courses, but we also are very aggressive in being off campus because all 3 of our campuses are space constrained. So everything we can do, it's almost like work share program. You know, take every Friday off. Well, no, it's not that way, but maybe your Monday class is all on the campus and your Wednesday class might be off campus. That's a hybrid kind of course. And as far as growth and decline, we'll stay with specifically with Tacoma, and Dr. Stewart can talk about that.
Well, good, and thank you for that answer. And Dr. Stewart, before you begin, let me introduce you to our Director of Marketing, Economic Development over on this side of the room, and do keep in mind and talk up the potential on the other side of Tacoma Park, because there's really some good opportunities there,
yes.
Growth, transportation, other kinds of things that might be exciting in the future. Doctor, please.
Welcome. Hello, everyone. Let me make this real quick. The campus has a couple of specific areas of emphasis, as we've talked about before. One of those that will continue to grow as we all age are the health sciences. The building, the Health Sciences Center, was too small the day we moved into it. We're continuing to do things on the West Campus, on Georgia Avenue, to try to grow those programs, and new ones keep springing up. The Emergency Medical Services Program has just migrated from Rockville to Tacoma Park, Silver Spring, as is a course in polysomnography technology, sleep disorders, which will be coming online next year. The Board of Trustees probably approved that about an hour ago. So we will continue to grow those kinds of programs. We've also invested heavily in 2 arts facilities, and the enrollments in those programs will continue to grow because we will specifically recruit for those students. The things that are declining in terms of students actually being on campus are computer applications and computer science. A lot of that can be taught via distance learning, and every innovation in terms of programming makes it less likely that we have to offer that stuff in formal classes. So you can do that for yourselves now as your computers continue to get smarter and smarter. So those particular programs are shrinking. Some disciplines go in and out of favor with students, depending mainly, in my field, criminology, about which television programs are most popular at a certain time. Now, I've lived through the Silence of the Lambs phase, where everybody wanted to be an FBI agent. I've lived through the Law and Order phase, where everybody wanted to be a lawyer. And we are currently, I think, coming to the end of the CSI phase, because most of the students who want to be crime scene investigators have finally realized that it takes a lot of math and chemistry to succeed in those particular fields. So I don't know what will be next, but you can track enrollments in the criminal justice field actually based on television, and I'm only slightly facetious about that, being slightly facetious about that particular thing. Biology and the other hard sciences that support the health sciences will continue to grow. We are currently running biology classes and labs from about 7:30 in the morning until about 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday, and most of all day Saturday. And so the next big thing we need on our campus is a expanded science facility so that we can continue to teach the 3 semesters of biology that you need to enter into any of the credit health science courses. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, thanks. And speaking of a sleep disorder program, I suggest bringing the students down here will either cure them or create them.
They sleep just fine in class. It's at night that's the issue.
Councilmember Wright.
Thanks so much, Dr. Stewart and Mr. Kapp, for coming, and I know we're keeping you to a bit of a later hour than was on the schedule originally, so we appreciate that. First, I would just say that I think the most important recommendation that came out of McNack was the last recommendation in the presentation, and the last thing on here, which is just the creation of, or the ongoing city-college partnership. So I think that's the most important thing, and the thing we strive to the most. I do have a couple of specific questions. One is to just understand the master plan process. Just to clarify, it's a 10-year plan, but you redo it like every 5 or 6 years, is that right? So
correct. We're actually required to update it every 5 years.
Okay. And then how much?
And we use 10-year projections, so
Right,
that's the
right,
confusion. It's
right.
a 10-year projection, which I should say the state of Maryland updates annually, So we track that annually, and every 5 years we're supposed to do the formal editing and updating of the master plan. Hopefully the next time we go around, we've done it 2 times since I've been here now, the next 5-year rendition won't be so much effort, but it's 10-year projections with a 5-year update.
Mm-hmm. And how much does the previous master plan influence the next one? Is it sort of, do you wipe the board clean and start all over again, or is there some expectation that the new one's supposed to tie or make sense to the plans related to the previous one?
You know, there's two answers. One, if we did a good job, and the logic to this is that it's really driven by enrollment projections, which are pretty consistent, and it's driven by the state of Maryland, which drives your space deficits. So there's good logic there, and then you get in to build your programs that meet those space deficits. So if we've done all that pretty well and did it correctly with good logic, it should be pretty close. So that's one side. You would think there wouldn't be much change. But on the other side, you heard Dr. Stewart say that some programs can completely collapse and some can grow. So that could cause a change. We had occasion, my predecessor never had in the master plan that Giant Bakery was even involved in it. And all of a sudden, Giant Bakery went vacant, and literally, and as he told me the story, the day after he talked to the vice president of Giant, who said, we're not moving. The next day, boom, gone, and it was on the market. That wasn't in the master plan at all. And there was a whole master plan built that had nothing to do with that, but it came available, and Dr. Nunley, the former president, council members and such, and many community members supported the college and the county, and then the college acquiring that building and incorporating that into the master plan, which required an editing and an updating of that master plan there. So one would believe we've done a lot of good stuff in the past master plan, and we shouldn't change it much. On the other hand, we have a different AE team. Our programming team that have done the data are the same folks because they have a PhD in academic planning, and the other is an expert in Maryland higher education numbers. But the previous team that did the master plan was Einhorn Yaffe Prescott. The current master planning AE team is Choben Holbeck. So you bring an architect team on that has a different view. So the other night when we had David Ben, the principal, in front of the community, he was not afraid to throw some things on the table that we already knew were controversial and that I cringed at because I lived through it before. But he's a pair of fresh eyes, and he was. And I think the session went very well. No one really got hostile about it. It went well. He threw things on the table. Folks told him, that won't work. This won't work. But he looked at everything all over again. I can't predict whether he'll come back with a totally drastic, completely change. I would not believe, because the other thing I should say is we have to solve our enrollment growth on our existing land. So we need to know, we own this, we have this, what can we do to meet that 10-year growth? So we probably wouldn't come up with a plan that says sell the campus and move over to somewhere else. That's not going to be that drastic. Lots of tweaks. And frankly, with the enrollment projections between what we saw in 2002 to 2012, and now we're doing 06 to 16. The enrollment projections have only changed by about 1,000 students, and that's total head count, that's not full-time equivalent, so it's not a dramatic change, it was a decrease. So the space deficits that we saw in the previous 10 years are pretty close to what we're seeing now, and I'm not aware of a program that's totally collapsed. It's not as if for Dr. Stewart's campus we had a computer science building in the previous one, and now there's not a need for one of those at all. It hasn't changed that dramatically. So I gave you, I know, 2 answers, but I think we're going to stay pretty consistent. However, it's a new team, we're getting new thoughts from the neighbors, and that'll give us an opportunity to look at things again with fresh eyes and tweak things, and we'll see where we end up.
And I think we've convinced David Ben that it's not a good idea to go into Jessup Blair Park. He wants to badly because he thinks it will provide a better hinge between the east and west campuses, but I think that the 19 folks who showed up last Tuesday night did a very good job of convincing him that that's not on the table. Everything else is, but not that.
A follow-up question would be around flexibility associated or written into the master plan. So, I mean, you just gave a good example. When they designed the master plan, they didn't necessarily know that the bakery was coming, a possibility. And I'm asking specifically related to the Tacoma Park campus because I could see you're talking about mainly planning for the land they own as opposed to something you might buy. But is it possible to write flexibility into the plan in the sense of if we can acquire one of the 2 storage buildings or a site across Georgia or something that's in close proximity that would tie into the college plan, can that be written in a way that
yeah, you can amend a master plan. It just takes a resolution by the Board of Trustees, and then it's submitted to the Maryland Higher Education Commission.
But in the writing of the plan, can you talk about options or contingency as opposed to?
It's not only a 10-year master plan in terms of physical building and meeting that enrollment growth, but it's a 20-year land use plan. Having said all that, there's still language in there that allows some types of options. Actually, we try to write the master plan pretty flexibly so that if something comes up, again, if something's not in the master plan, 0 chance of it being funded at the state. So we try to make it as flexible as we can so that if we need to go to the state for that funding, that it's in the master plan. That's the first thing. In fact, next 2 weeks from now, we'll be meeting with a bunch of facilities folks, and you have a checklist. And all your CIP projects that you submit, you go through the checklist, and the first question is it in the master plan? Yes. Okay, you can continue to march. No, that project goes nowhere. Right. So we do try to make the master plans pretty flexible so that we always get to check yes.
So by that logic, it would sort of make sense to potentially put in the idea of being able to purchase one or both of those facilities so that you could, again, be able to check, yes, that was a possibility in our master plan.
I think there could probably be some discussion in there. There's pros and cons. The college is not out seeking funding right now for purchasing a building, but something could be in there in terms of language, but that has all kinds of ramifications of the folks that owns those properties, which now it's out in the public.
Right.
So there's issues there.
And I don't want to put either of you on the spot, but you talked about the Jessup Blair Park thing sort of being off the table. Are there any other clear things that came up or thoughts that you'd share at this point, or kind of high-level thoughts about issues?
Not until, frankly, we haven't even talked to the president yet.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to have a very large menu of things to bring to him, but also with those options to say what the community and what the college campus says the pros and cons, and try to lay all those out for him, and then give her through the provost, because Dr. Stewart's his campus, so we'll lay it all out to him, and then jointly we'll go meet the president with Dr. Stewart's boss and my boss, and lay out all those recommendations, and from there you really start narrowing it down. But I don't know that I would say, we're at the point where we think things are totally off the table, although Jessup Blair Park's a good one to be off the table. We're still in the brainstorming session almost.
Yeah.
And you kind of just want to have everything on there so that we can look at the advantages, disadvantages, all that. And again, have not been to our own internal senior administration, have been to the senior administration on the campus, but not at the college level.
I mean, I don't want to take things off the table either, and I don't know what you heard from residents, but one thing I do hear a lot is opposition to the idea of expanding on Block 69, making those buildings that are there bigger. There's something that I frequently hear opposition to and concern about by people. So I would just share that as a major concern that I hear. I don't know if you guys heard that also the other night. So.
Well, it's interesting when you have 19 folks in the room, there are differences of opinions. And there are folks that would like us totally out of Block 69. And there are folks that maybe would have, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but my question to the community was, put the emotionalism aside. You have a fantastic architect like David Benn standing in front of you. If it ever came available, would you trust a guy like that working with the community to put a building there that was acceptable to the community? And, after a couple hours with him there was folks that maybe weren't so hysterical about it, and there were folks that certainly were. So there was definitely a difference of opinions on all those things, and I would measure all that if I was presenting it to the administration and say, if you thought you were going to do that, it would have to be very agreeable to the community, and it would have to be something that would be worked very seriously and also with a very good architect team. But on the other hand, that might be a pain too far. That just might be just too painful. So I don't know that anything is too far off the table, but I think we should discuss everything. But we're nowhere near implementation, so no one should worry about anything. And we're going to come back to the community with different options to look at, and that might be one. Yeah.
Two more times.
Yeah.
So you get two
number
more
of
options.
options and then a recommended draft. Final draft.
We appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
And if I can just add 30 seconds worth to Councilmember Wright's kind of pursuit of areas of questions and opinions. I was ready to go the same place in terms of wondering about the addition into the master plan of purchasing the public storage facilities, thinking that expansion west is the way to go and is also a nice hinge for the West Campus, and also very concerned about exactly how to proceed, how you might end up proceeding in any way in doing anything in Block 69, and knowing that that's the real can be the biggest point of contention with our residents, and wanting to feel that however that proceeds, that if it proceeds, that's probably the thing that we'll want to pay the closest attention to.
I think without specifically addressing that point, I know there's history here before me, which folks in your audience can, and maybe you all are part of that history too, I don't know, but the previous president and Dr. Perella before that and the current president have emphasized the fact that Montgomery College is a community college, and they all mention it as the community's college. And the community's college doesn't grow and be a partner with the community by getting into fights with the community. There may be points in times that we disagree, and I'm not saying we're all going to be giving hugs forever, but there might be a point we disagree and we have to march in a different direction, but it's not the community's college if you alienate your community. So if we get in a fight with Tacoma Park City and we lose students because of that, because we have a bad reputation, that'd be a bad thing. I say the same thing in front of Rockville City, and I've said the same thing down at Park and Planning, and that's been pretty well drilled through our heads. We always look for win-wins. We have not hit the point yet where there's been a total disagreement and we've had to go in a different direction, but I'm just not saying there couldn't be, but you'd have to weigh the benefits and the costs of that. Would you want to really force a battle over that? I don't think so. I don't think so. And the previous administration moved that building out of the park. It just wasn't worth the pain we were going through, and the reputation was being sullied of the college for that. And by putting it on the corner of George Avenue and Washington and 410, it became a win-win. It's going to be a beautiful building. It's going to make a statement for the college right there out front. The community's going to see it. They're going to go into it, and it's going to be a community's building for art programs for Dr. Stewart, and it's going to be a win-win, and nobody's beating us up anymore about being in the park. So that turned into a great thing, and we didn't alienate people there once we made that move, and I think if whatever our resolution is for the future of Dr. Stewart's campus, hopefully it'll be something that for the most part is a win-win. It's tough to always have it for all 19 people that were in our session the other day, but you want to try to make it the best for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that I recognize that we also, I'll just say the bigger we have had some difficulties in getting our arms around your process and our relationship with it. And there's been some back and forth, any number of directions about people feeling left out of a process or surprised by something. And I think to the extent that we continue to have these conversations, we have a better understanding of the process, and hopefully we can all work together to have a win-win, a continuation of past win-wins.
Correct.
Other questions down this direction? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Time to go home.
For you.
For us.
We have one more item, and it sounds like we've got 5 minutes worth to do on that, and then we will be at the end of our agenda. So,
Alana?
just following up on Councilmember Wright's two questions about the elementary school proposed addition process.
To follow up on those questions regarding the process, essentially they're going through their process, but in terms of council comment, they probably would want it as part of the mandatory referral process. So as the city can continue to give comment to the architectural team, and I did have to talk with them after their presentation, and they will give us an update once they have determined, what the wall materials will be and what the landscaping is. I'm expecting that will come after the point is passed when the council would give a comment to the planning board for mandatory referral. And usually the council can issue a resolution that comments on a proposal. It can be a resolution of no comment. It can be a recommendation. It can be an appreciation, but any type of resolution. And generally, the city in the past has preferred to issue that at a time that it's included in the staff report that goes to the planning board, and so that the council's comments are incorporated into the staff's recommendation to the planning board, the planning board staff's recommendation to the planning board. And we're expecting this to go before the planning board at the end of June, so the resolution is currently scheduled to come before you May 12th, which is a Monday. Generally, this time would be used for you to give me an indication of what types of comments you'd like to see in the resolution, or what concerns you may have regarding the project. What we could do is have a work session prior to the resolution, prior to the vote on the resolution. So schedule a work session the same evening as the resolution if your concerns don't differ that significantly from those that were raised, that have already been raised.
I think this might be a situation where it would be helpful to have the resolution a little bit in advance, so that we could probably avoid some cycle time if we got it, a week, the Friday before the normal Friday we would receive something, if that's possible, at least from my perspective, because it would give me time to kind of ruminate on it and make some specific comments, and sometimes by email, we can, as council members, we can even kind of sort some things out.
That would be fine.
Alana, were you envisioning, if we have a work session, though, before the resolution, in order to get into the staff packet, the resolution has to be passed on May 12th, is that correct? I'm just trying to get a sense of the timing.
It could, conceivably, it could be pushed back a week.
Okay.
I believe so, because it's scheduled for the end of June. Usually we like to give them about 5 weeks, but I can check on it. So it has to be heard within 60 days of the date that it was submitted to the planning board, and it was submitted, I at the end of April, which would mean that it would have to be heard by the end of June.
What I would
I'm sorry,
suggest,
at the end of June.
given Councilmember Wright's comments, is that Alana and I can touch base tomorrow, and the mayor will be in to schedule to talk about agendas, and we'll just try to see how we can mirror those two things, just to make sure that we do get it into the staff packet, but also make sure that we have an opportunity to get something out to the council well in advance for your review.
The planning board can also receive any comments once the resolution has been passed. The council does have the prerogative to pass an additional resolution, so it doesn't need to be the final word.
And then what about the other issue in terms of scheduling a time for the people who are more in charge of the transition to address Councilmember Clay's issue and an issue I've heard from a number of residents?
We can look into who the appropriate Montgomery County staff people would be to come and speak to you.
Okay. Colleen?
Maybe we could also help identify what some of the potential places are that they could go to. A couple of my council members have suggested talking to Columbia Union College, and I took the opportunity during the lengthy presentation on the traffic circulation to talk to the to talk to Brett Stewart from the college, and I just feel like they haven't tried very hard, but they don't know our city like we do, and so maybe we should make more of an effort to find the spot.
Any other questions? Any other solutions? Then we're adjourned.
Yay.